My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Shipyard. Time has entered winter unknowingly. Winter in Italy is not cold and is roughly the same as that of friends living in the south. So Carlo didn't feel the chill at all. Of course, if you ignore the fur coat he was wearing, you can take what he said to be the truth. However, in winter, the Andeshal shipyard is still bustling with activity. The steady flow of orders keeps the factory's workers motivated, because they all know that only with a steady stream of orders can they receive generous salaries. Unlike ordinary workers who only focus on orders, the management of the shipyard is more concerned about the 2 warships built in the number 34 dockyard. These 2 warships are a manifestation and symbol of the strength of Andeshal shipyard, and they enable the shipyard to become the main supplier of the navy. Therefore, after finalizing the order for 2 Venice-class armored cruisers, Andeshal shipyard immediately organized elite troops to build these 2 warships. After more than 2 months of construction, half of the hull has been built, and the outline of the hull can be initially seen. Thank you for your hard work. At the number 3 dock, Carlo watched the workers driving rivets into the ship's planks one by one, and thanked the people around him. Your Majesty, you're welcome. This is what our shipyard should do. Acre Lunny, the head of Andeshal shipyard, accepted Carlo's words and expressed that he did not dare to be disobedient. This Acre Lunny is incredible. Under his hands, the Andeshal shipyard has gained a new lease of life. It has transformed from an unknown shipyard in Italy into one of the largest large-scale shipyards in Italy. Now it is taking advantage of the opportunity to obtain more shipbuilding orders from the Navy. After all, everyone knows that the profit of civilian ships is not as high as that of military ships, and the construction of military ships is also a reflection of the strength of the shipyard, and they are very keen to make Andeshal shipyard a supplier to the Navy. Therefore, everyone at the shipyard attaches great importance to Carlo's visit. Although this king does not have a regent due to his age, as long as you know a little bit, you will know that this man is young and mature, and even the powerful prime minister will think twice about his speech. In addition, who doesn't know that the 2 Venice-class cruise ships under construction were paid for by His Majesty? You don't need to think about it to know that this is the goodwill expressed by the king to the navy. The navies of various countries have always had a deep trust in the monarch and have become a good hand in restraining the army. It is Italy's blessing that our own monarch can think of this at this age. Okay, let's stop chatting and turn to the present. Carlo was chatting with General Manager Lunny for a few words and immediately turned the topic to others. Your Excellency Bryn, I'm very satisfied with the design of your factory this time. I heard that many designs were proposed by you. The Bryn, Carlo asked, was none other than Benedetto Bryn, the chief designer of the shipyard. Bryn, who is in his 50s, does not look old at all. He wears very little than Carlo. He works in the shipyard and design desk all year round. Busyness makes his skin dark and his hands rough. Your Majesty was joking. This is all Vittorio's credit. I was just making a few remarks. At this time, the old designer began to support the younger generation, and Vittorio Cuniberti, who was named by him, smiled at Carlo with a somewhat embarrassed expression, looking like a later generation programmer. It is said that Bryn is one of the best ship designers in Italy. I wonder how you think Italian ships should be designed in the future. Although Bryn was supporting his juniors, Carlo did not let the designer go. He planned to consider his vision. After Carlo asked, the scene became quiet. Although others didn't know why Carlo asked this question, they also knew that the chief designer's answer should be very important. Faced with the suddenly quiet environment, Bryn was not affected by it. Instead, he frowned and thought for a while before answering. I think Italian ship design should take a high quality route. Facing Bryn's answer, Carlo looked at the old man and waited for his further explanation. Because this is too simple, anyone can say this, but it does not show his level. Sure enough, Bryn explained it later. Currently, technological innovation is changing with each passing day, making warships in various countries obsolete very quickly. This makes many designers unable to start Sometimes the blueprints they have just designed seem a little unsweetable when they wake up the next day. Take the ones built in our country. For the Tullio class battleship, when it was first built, it was the most powerful battleship in the world. But after the construction was completed, various countries had battleships more powerful than the Tullio class. And this class the warships are no longer so advanced, but I heard that the Navy plans to build 3 improved models of this class, which is a bit puzzling. As soon as Bryn opened his mouth, he talked about the proud work of his old rival. What he said next made everyone in the shipyard frightened. If this was known to the Navy, it would offend someone. Fortunately, Carlo also knew what they were thinking and gave them reassurance. This is a discussion between myself and Mr. Bryn, and I won't spread it everywhere. Bryn also knew that he had not paid attention to what he said just now, so he changed the topic to the aspect that Carlo was interested in. Currently I believe that Italian ship design needs to serve the Navy, and the threats facing Italy's Navy mainly come from the pressure of the French Navy. The Austro-Hungarian Navy was directly ignored here. Of course, with the current strength of the Austro-Hungarian Navy, it could hit the knees of the Italian Navy, even if it jumped up, let alone mention it, and I think that our Navy should not be tit for tat with France in terms of scale, because our country's shipbuilding funds are not as good as France's. Instead, it should take a small step and build new warships at a speed of no more than 2 ships per level. Among them, new warships are the best. It also focuses on speed and firepower, which can delay its elimination. Yes, in Bryn's view, there are 3 important factors in warships, and firepower and speed are the most important. As for protection, when it cannot meet the 3 requirements, it should be given up first point. Although Carlo did not agree with what Bryn said, it was best not to give up on firepower, protection, and speed. Of course, he was not a paranoid or a perfectionist. Of course, we also know that in this era of great development in shipbuilding technology, it is very good for a new ship launched to guarantee its main position for 10 years. In many cases, they are transferred to the reserve force after serving for only a few years. In fact, if you think about it, the time for Italian shipbuilding is really not a good time. In the 1980s and 1990s, warship technology was undergoing great development, and Italy built a large number of warships during this period. As a result, when the 20th century came, they would be immediately eliminated. On the contrary, in the war with the Ottomans, not a single battleship was able to take action point. Unlike Germany, they chose the right time to build their ships. They immediately followed up with the dreadnoughts as soon as they came out, creating a high seas fleet that even the UK was afraid of. To say that Italy spends less money than Germany, it is not much less, but the gap between the two is too big. And Bryn's words made Carlo feel that he had learned something again. All situations must be combined with reality, and he still has a long way to go. Chapter 50 to New Year, a good start. 1881 was a very frustrating year for the Italians. In this year, Italy not only suffered from internal drought, but also lost the opportunity to colonize Tunisia externally. So when faced with 1881, many people don't want to recall it, because it was all bad news at the end of the year. It is necessary to summarize the year, but the results are not optimistic. Although Carlo does not hold great power, the data collected by the government will not be concealed from him, so Carlo can understand all the data in Italy. First of all, don't count on Italy's economic growth this year. 2 things at home and abroad have caused Italy to lose so much. It is unrealistic to expect economic growth. Therefore, in 1881, Italy's economic growth rate was 0.11%. Taking into account inflation, it was actually still growing at a negative rate. Such economic data makes the Italian government lose face. Although everyone knows what caused it, in the final analysis, the government's leadership is incompetent. Although it was mainly caused by the previous government, it still needs to bear the blame. In addition, in terms of import and export, Italy's import volume has increased significantly, reaching a share of 1.771 billion lire. The largest increase in import volume was grain imported from Russia and Romania. This year, Italy imported 2.87 million tons of various grains, resulting in widespread grain prices in Europe this year up 5%. Exports fell slightly to 1.564 billion lira due to internal and external factors. The number one export is still textiles, followed by other products such as fur, furniture, alcohol, tobacco, etc. If you look at Italy's foreign exports, you will know the type of economy it has this year. Italy's trade deficit is 207 million lire, which makes Finance Minister Sabo and Economy and Trade Minister Mark Leder almost lose their hair, in order to prevent Mark Leder from becoming too powerful. In the Ministry of Agriculture, the Prime Minister, in the name of raising merit, he was transferred to the position of Minister of Economy and Trade, and the former Minister of Economy and Trade Gillites also changed positions, and the trio were all moved. Of course, there is no good news. That is, despite the economic downturn in Italy this year, the people have not expressed dissatisfaction with the Depretis government. Because everyone knows that this is not his problem. Of course, the people are not always patient. If the economy does not develop next year, then the Prime Minister will need to say something. Of course, government issues do not affect Carlo. This can be regarded as a major benefit of losing power, although this is not what Carlo wants to see. Of course, the new year requires new atmosphere, so Carlo also carefully prepares the annual New Year's speech. Because of this speech, Carlo didn't even have a good Christmas, which made the two little princesses very unhappy. Afterwards, Carlo said many good words, and promised many unequal treaties, to make them angry. On New Year's Day, January 1st, Roman residents poured into the streets to participate in the New Year's parade. During the popular parade, the guards outside the Quirinal Palace were busy preparing fireworks, while Carlo was watching for the last time in his small room. Speech. Although this was Carlo's second New Year's speech, he was still a little nervous. Carlo didn't want to recall last year's speech, which was a complete disaster. He didn't even remember going back to the room. In fact, from the first speech, Carlo felt that he was no different from other people. He was neither calm nor general-like. He felt like he was in elementary school for the first time on stage to receive a certificate, and he was at a loss. So this time, in order to avoid the last dilemma, Carlo locked himself in a room and forced himself to study hard to deepen his memory. It's just that this method doesn't seem to be of much use. The harder I study, the less I feel I can remember it. Just as Carlo was struggling with his New Year's speech, a pair of jade hands quietly opened the door, and a beautiful woman looked at Carlo's back and walked slowly over. "Hey, it's you." Nah. Carlo, whose thoughts were interrupted, turned to look at lying behind him and exclaimed, "Your Majesty, please let go." Nah, who had her hand caught, opened her teeth with a red face, trying to get Carlo to let go of her hand. She tapped Carlo's shoulder just now, and just as she was about to speak, her hand was grabbed. "Nah, what do you want from me?" Facing Nah's words, Carlo began to talk about him, and he grabbed the little maid with his greedy hands, and refused to let go. Nah, who was being questioned by Carlo, was distracted by the topic at this time and spoke without thinking. "I heard that His Majesty locked himself in the room for several hours, and did not come out. I was a little worried, so I came to take a look." The little maid blushed more and more as she spoke, and it almost spread to her neck, especially after Carlo grabbed her hand and felt the strength of her hand. Her face was like a fragrant red apple, making Carlo want to take a bite. Well, I have to admit that Carlo's straight man's hardcore pickup tactics finally paid off. Thinking about it, you know that in the palace, there are very few boys and girls of Carlo and Naya's age, and no one in the palace knows what Carlo thinks about the little maid. Since this person is His Majesty's favorite, no matter how beautiful and charming the little maid is, no one dares to have any thoughts about her, or even pay attention to what she says. So, when Naya was in the palace, apart from chatting with the maids, the only man who could chat more was Carlo. Therefore, there are many opportunities for the two to come into contact. However, although there are many opportunities, Carlo's methods are so rough that it is impossible to see. Opportunities came to him like raindrops, but he blocked them all one by one. However, after nearly 2 years of training, Carlo finally learned a little bit about coaxing girls. This finally has some results. At least Naya won't hide away from her, ignoring the reason why her hand was caught. This is still a good start. Your Majesty, are you worried about the speech? Although Naya is a maid, she has stayed in the palace for so long, so she knows something about it. How can I worry about this if it doesn't happen? In front of Naya, How could Carlo show that he was worried about the speech? He couldn't embarrass himself in front of the little maid. Really? Naya looked at him with disbelief. What? You don't believe it? When the girl looked at him in disbelief, Carlo's masculinity exploded, and he planned to prove himself. The little maid didn't say anything, just looked at him, her eyes clearly showing disbelief. Being looked down upon by Naya made the boy Carlo furious, but as soon as he rolled his eyes, he thought of a way. Well, if you don't believe it, how about we make a bet? Facing Carlo's proposal, the little maid was obviously a little bit taken aback. What bet? Let's do this. If my speech is successful, then I will win. You have to agree to a condition. What? Conditions? You can only say it if you promise. I won't agree if you don't tell me. Seeing that the little maid didn't fall into the trap, Carlo had no choice but to whisper, well, if I win, you kiss me. If I lose, I'll kiss you. Not. But then, what do you think we should do? Faced with Carlo's insistence on taking advantage, Naya decided to fight back. If you lose, then kiss Lulu. Carlo knew that Lulu was a small spotted pig who was kept as a pet by several maids. The king of Italy kissed a pig's mouth. This was big news. Carlo immediately wanted to shake his head and refuse, but when he saw the little maid looking at him expectantly, he thought about it for a while and became fierce. He tried hard. It was just a speech. What was he afraid of? If he succeeded, he would kiss the little maid, but if he failed, he would kiss the pig. I made a profit no matter what. Okay, that's what we've settled on. Well, no regrets. After the two agreed, Carlo was very motivated. At this moment, there was a knock on the door, and the voice of the captain of the guard came from outside the door. Your Majesty, it's time to prepare a New Year's speech. Okay, I understand. I'll come right away. Carlo glanced at Naya next to him, and was ready to give a speech with great momentum. Now he was not afraid at all, and he only wanted to show the little maid how he punished her. Sorry, I have a lot of work these days and there are a few updates. I hope everyone can understand this. Mantau is a part-time author, and I will try to resume the speed of 2 updates after these few days pass. Finally, Mantau would like to say, readers who like this book, please give me a recommendation vote. Chapter 53: The Departure of a National Hero. Carlo was in a very good mood these days, because he couldn't help but smile when he thought of the embarrassment of the little maid covering her face with saliva because of her kiss. Of course, Carlo had a big bruise on his waist because the client was embarrassed by the little maid's appearance. The unique skill of 9-yin white bone claw is really a girl's specialty. Even the little maid knows it without any teacher. But what makes Carlo happy is besides this, there are also changes in Naya. After winning the bet and experiencing a failed kiss, the relationship between Carlo and the maid developed rapidly. Now Carlo can hold the hand of the maid and can occasionally be held by it. How can Carlo not let Carlo do this? Luo was happy. So after the new year, Carlo spent less time visiting and often took his maid with him to experience the two of them. Of course, this allowed Carlo to experience kissing again, but this time he didn't get confused again. The saliva is the beginning of letting the little maid feel the fun of it. It has come to an end now. If you continue writing, you will be noticed by river crabs. Of course, the happy time is always so short-lived, and soon Carlo needs to prepare for a visit to Germany. In fact, since the arrival of the new year, the government has begun to prepare for a visit to Germany. The Italian government needs to consult with Germany on the planning of the route, which people and cities to visit, and what activities need to be participated. For this reason, Foreign Minister Boccona has been running to the Prime Minister's office almost every day, and gossip has almost spread. However, it is very clear within the government that the top priority within the government for more than a month has been the visit to Germany. The itinerary and visit matters have been initially planned, and the next step is to show it to the Prime Minister and Carlo. Yes, let's arrange the itinerary this way. In the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Desperatus agreed to implement the itinerary. After reading it, although there are no problems on the Prime Minister's side, there are some problems on Carlo's side. Why is it that the agenda is mostly about communicating with Crown Prince Frederick, the Official who arranged the itinerary faced Carlo's question and immediately explained, "Your Majesty, the Kaiser is too old and is not suitable for working too much, so after discussing with Germany, the Crown Prince will do it for him." I understand this, but you need to consider the ages of Crown Prince Frederick, and if there is to be communication between the royal family, it is best if they are of the same age. The eldest grandson of Emperor William is very suitable. The age gap between us is much smaller. That's right. Carlo's purpose was to replace the communicating Crown Prince with the future Emperor's eldest grandson, William II. Facing Carlo's words, the official spoke with some embarrassment. "This requires renegotiation with the German side." "Then, let's renegotiate. I believe Germany will meet my small request." It was clear that Carlo had no regard for the official's feelings. Although he knew it would increase his workload, the official was ignored at the thought of preemptively establishing a relationship with Wilhelm II. Faced with Carlo's insistence, the official was obviously defeated and could only do what he wanted, but he still needed to report the matter to his superiors beforehand. Since the king wants to communicate with his peers, let's do what he wants. Now, Prime Minister Depretis has a lot of things to do and has no time to pay attention to such a small issue. The news from the Prime Minister's office allowed Carlo's request to be met. However, while the government was busy preparing for the visit to Germany, news came from Caprera Island that Mr. Garibaldi had died of illness. This news shocked Italy. This man is the idol of many people in Italy. Therefore, the news about Garibaldi's death was reported in bold headlines on the front pages of major newspapers, which immediately caused a sensation. This man is not only famous in Europe, but also very famous in South America. You must know that the Red Shirt Army formed by Garibaldi was originally in South America. Therefore, in addition to Europe, South America also reported extensively on this Italian national hero. Of course, no matter how much they do abroad, they will never be as sensational as those in Italy. The day after Garibaldi's death, Prime Minister Depretis and King Carlo stated in Rome that they would hold a state funeral for the national hero and personally carry his coffin. After the Prime Minister and the King spoke, various figures spoke out for a while, urging them to contribute to Mr. Garibaldi's death. If you compare the treatment of national heroes in front of them, it is simply a world of difference. During his lifetime, Garibaldi only had a high reputation among the people, but the government avoided him like a snake or a scorpion. But now that Garibaldi has passed away, the government immediately discovered that Garibaldi was good and wanted to join in the fun. So it is ridiculous to say that living national heroes are like poison, and they are valuable only when they are dead. Of course, for Carlo, Garibaldi's death was more about the death of a respected old man. Of course, he was still a little angry. It wasn't until Garibaldi's death that he received the news that someone had neglected his duty. "Tell me, why didn't you get the news before?" Carlo looked at the captain of the guard in front of him, asked a question, and then sat back. The obstruction above made Carlo disappear into the darkness, which put great pressure on the Baron. His Majesty the captain of the guard knew that he had made a mistake, but after thinking about it, he still told the truth. Sometimes it is not terrible to make a mistake, but if you try to cover it up, it will cause more serious consequences. It is obvious that the captain of the guard is the executor of this theory. So from the mouth of the captain of the guard, Carlo learned about Garibaldi's life situation at this stage. After Carlo took over the Red Shirts, the disappointed Garibaldi returned to his home island of Caprera. However, when he came back this time, Garibaldi's health was obviously not as good as before, so his old friend Cosenz went to the island with him. Nothing happened. At first, Garibaldi and his friends lived a leisurely life every day. But one time, Garibaldi fell at home. At first the national hero felt fine, but then things got worse. However, at this time, Cosenz and Garibaldi's family members concealed the news. It is said that this was Garibaldi's intention. He did not want to disturb other people for his own reasons. He just hired a doctor he trusted to treat him, but the national hero, who was already over 70 years old, ultimately failed to survive and passed away in early 1882 at the age of 75. When the captain of the guard told him the reason, Carlo couldn't help but praise him. "This man really deserves to be called a hero. I'll Make a note of it this time, so if there is a next time then you know what to do. Carlo raised it high and put it down with a kiss, which was considered to have revealed the matter a week later. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in Rome to see this national hero on his last journey. Carlo and the Prime Minister also fulfilled their promises and personally carried Garibaldi's coffin. The national hero will then be buried in Sardinia in accordance with his wishes. With the death of Garibaldi, it represents the departure of that magnificent era of unification. As the old era leaves, a new era is about to begin. As for the future direction of Italy, that is what Carlo and Prime Minister Depretis need to consider. Chapter 54 Visit to Germany. 1. Berlin railway station is one of the few large platforms in Germany, and the railways connecting it to all parts of the country make it extremely busy. However, the station was temporarily closed today. A large number of passengers were ordered not to step out of the waiting room, and the platform was filled with officers and soldiers. Well-informed Berliners knew at a glance that a big shot must be visiting either the Prime Minister or the King. Didn't you see Count Karl von Weizsäcker, the foreign minister, waiting on the platform? For the foreign minister to take action in person, he must be the Prime Minister or King of a big country. If you know a little bit about international news, the result can be easily guessed. The young King and Prime Minister of Italy are coming to visit Germany. Could today be the day for their arrival? They guessed right. Today is the day when the Italian delegation arrives in Berlin. Although there was an unexpected incident involving the death of a national hero, this still did not change the time of Italy's visit to Germany, but many things were expedited. A train arrived at the station amidst everyone's expectations, and the icons on the carriage all showed that it was the Italian delegation. There was no need for anyone to direct. The orchestra that had been prepared immediately started playing music, and the prepared welcoming crowd immediately smiled and waved the national flags of the two countries, completely enhancing the atmosphere. There were also two well-dressed children, under the command of adults, holding flowers and preparing to lay flowers in the carriage. Carlo and the Prime Minister were ready. Your Majesty, don't be nervous, just treat it like a normal sightseeing. The Prime Minister doesn't have to worry about me. I'm not nervous at all. The two leaders, who encouraged each other, looked at each other with smiles on their faces and walked off the platform pretending to be relaxed. Of course, as the King of Italy, Carlo walked in the front, while the Prime Minister was half a body behind. Then the other members of the delegation walked out of the carriage one by one according to the level and importance of their positions. Welcome, King Carlo, to Berlin. I believe that His Majesty's arrival will lay the foundation for friendly relations between the two countries. Count Weizsäcker, the German foreign minister, immediately came up to greet Carlo and delivered a welcome speech to Carlo. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the welcome. I wish your two countries can have closer relations. Carlo is not bad either, and he can be neither humble nor overbearing when facing the foreign minister. After greeting Carlo, Count Weizsäcker immediately extended his hand to Prime Minister Depretis. Prime Minister Depretis, welcome to your visit to Berlin. Thank you for the welcome, Count. After the two briefly shook hands, Count Weizsäcker greeted several of the accompanying ministers behind them. At this time, the children, who had been instructed by the adults, presented flowers to Carlo and Prime Minister Depretis. Seeing the children, who were not much younger than him, respectfully laying flowers, Carlo always felt something strange that was indescribable. There were other procedures to go through during the welcome ceremony, and Carlo, one of the protagonists, was like a puppet, participating one by one according to the previous rehearsals. For example, he met with Italian compatriots in Germany, delivered a brief speech, accepted interviews with reporters, etc. After all these were completed, Carlo and the delegation rode in a carriage and headed towards the residence prepared by the Germans. Carlo and his party were arranged to live in Charlottenburg Palace. This summer palace, built by Frederick I for his wife Sophie Charlotte, is now an important residence of the Hohenzollern family in Berlin. It can be seen from here that the Germans still attach great importance to Carlo and his party. Everyone, in order to welcome friends from Italy, our country has prepared a welcome dinner. I hope you will attend when the time comes. After bringing them here, Count Weizsäcker, as foreign minister, extended an invitation to a welcome dinner to Carlo and his party. This is a European diplomatic practice. Generally, when a monarch or head of government visits, there will be a welcome dinner. Unless something urgent happens, as a guest, you will not refuse the host's kindness. Then, on behalf of everyone, I would like to thank your country for the invitation. We will definitely attend on time. After receiving the reply from the Italian delegation, Count Wiesaca left with satisfaction. But now everyone in the delegation can't afford to rest. They need to take out their carefully prepared clothes from their luggage to prepare for the dinner. It would be embarrassing to dress inappropriately, and no one wants to make that mistake. At 6:15, the newly dressed delegation members got into the carriage prepared by Germany and rushed to the dinner venue. The dinner was held in the White Hall of the Royal Castle, which is the main venue for various solemn events and monastic festivals, the opening of local self-government meetings and parliamentary work, and other various ceremonies. It is self-evident that the German side will place the dinner to welcome the Italians here. Hello, Emperor William. Hello, Chancellor Bismarck. Hello, Marshal Moltke. As soon as Carlo entered the door, he saw 3 people who would be famous even in later generations. However, compared with others who could only see photos, he saw 3 people in real life. Hello, King Carlo. Welcome to Berlin. As the Emperor of Germany, the white-haired William I stretched out his hand covered with age spots and held Carlo's hand, saying words of welcome. When Carlo faced William I, who was 1 year older than his grandfather, he could be said to be a grandson, so he naturally started to offer all kinds of flattery. Of course, Carlo didn't think that these 3 people were here just to greet him. In all likelihood, they were here for the Prime Minister Desperatus behind him. So after Carlo said a few words, he immediately handed over his position to the Prime Minister. Sure enough, when facing Prime Minister Desperatus, they obviously talked a lot more. Not only did William I speak, but Bismarck and Moltke also talked cordially with him. However, the conversation was not long and did not make anyone feel impatient. Then William I picked up a wine glass filled with red wine and tapped it with a small spoon. Everyone, let us welcome our friends from Italy. Cheers. Carlo also stood aside, holding a glass of juice and shouting together afterwards. The old emperor said a few words briefly and then went back to rest. Bismarck and Moltke were left responsible for entertaining the Italian party. Carlo took the opportunity to sneak to a corner of the hall and silently watch the lively dinner. Why? I don't like this environment. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. Carlo turned around and saw a young man in his early 20s standing behind him holding a wine glass. This young man, not much older than him, was very well dressed, but he had never seen his face before. But what was strange was that his hands were wearing gloves. With gloves, Carlo immediately guessed who it was. Yes, I don't really like such a lively scene. Does His Excellency, the Emperor Changsun, like such a scene? I don't like the excitement as much as you do. William II, whose name was mentioned, shook his head and answered casually, rather than participating in such an event, I might as well go to the military camp and stay for a while. At least I don't have to quarrel with these people. In order to get closer to the eldest grandson of Emperor William, Carlo brought the topic to the army. Although he had not been to the military camp a few times, it's pretty much what I thought. Although, I don't know why Carlo said this. William, who was about to enter the army for training at that time, was indeed full of yearning for the army. As a German prince, joining the army is his inevitable obligation. The education William received also made him yearn for an army full of honor. So the 2 young people chatted alone during the cocktail party. They had a good conversation about the ocean, the military, political ideas and other aspects. After a chat, William II thought that the Italian king, who was younger than himself, was very good, and both of them had similar views. Carlo believed that his only gain from this boring dinner was to get to know the future Kaiser Wilhelm II. This achievement brings the goal of visiting Germany close to half. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Visit to Germany. 2. Brandenburg is 20 kilometers away from the capital Berlin. It has a wide variety of flora and fauna, and is an ideal hunting ground point today. Carlo was dressed in hunting attire, and he and William, the emperor's eldest grandson, who were similarly dressed, were walking in the dense forest with shotguns. However, although with the help of hunting dogs and guards, the prey appeared one by one, but neither of them focused on the prey, but engaged in a verbal argument. William, I don't think there are any problems with Germany's diplomacy at the moment. Uniting Russia and Austria can stabilize Germany's eastern and southern fronts, and reduce the pressure on national defense. However, there is a worry in this diplomatic strategy, that is, when Russia and Austria compete, after resolving irreconcilable conflicts, which side should Germany stand on? Carlo's words made Emperor Changsun frown. He wanted to say that Germany could bring the two countries together, but he couldn't say this because he wasn't thick-skinned enough. This problem, the emperor's eldest grandson, who was questioned, couldn't come up with a result after stumbling for a long time, so he simply changed the question. Then tell me what to do, William. I'm the king of Italy and a stacker holder. How can I answer this question? When the emperor's eldest grandson brought the topic to him, how could Carlo answer it? This was an unanswerable question. The only answer is to keep one as an ally, then pretend that you are the monarch of Germany, and make your choice in your own way. Unexpectedly, William pressed harder, and asked Carlo to make the choice. Perhaps this was to serve as a reference for this. If it were my choice, then I would choose Vienna as an ally. Seeing that he couldn't shirk it, Carlo gave what he thought was the best answer. This was not a random guess on his part, but he sincerely believed that choosing the Austrians was the best choice for Germany. Although countless people in later generations believe that Germany's choice of allies in World War I was too poor, what would happen if Germany chose Russia? And they listed countless reasons for this, but these people have never really experienced this era, and they don't know that choosing allies is not just about choosing who you want. In terms of maximizing interests, Germany choosing the UK as its ally is simply the best choice, but has it ever been asked whether the UK is willing? By the same token, if you choose Russia as an ally, have you considered what Russia thinks? Moreover, Russia is in urgent need of funds to complete its own industrialization. Can Germany provide Russia with funds for its industrialization? Therefore, it is inevitable for Germany to choose Austria as an ally. Although there are various other reasons, the main reason is that Germany cannot provide Russia with its industrialization needs. France, on the other hand, has no problem at all. Its huge domestic capital is in urgent need of profit growth, and as long as Russia is willing to make concessions on interest, a steady stream of French funds will be enough for Russia to complete its industrialization. Of course, this is Carlo's conclusion, based on the current situation and historical trends. It is very suspicious that the answer is deduced. However, this is also a choice that is in the interests of Germany. Although Austria is weaker, it is much more dependent on Germany. There are few, and the demand for Germany is not as great as that of Russia. Those who think that Germany's increase in food tariffs alone will cause the breakdown of German-Russian relations can be dismissed. Although this is an inducement, the more important, Germany cannot meet Russia's demand for funds. Although Carlo knew all this, the emperor's eldest grandson William did not. At this time, he was a little surprised that Carlo chose Austria. Everyone knows how bad the relationship between Italy and the Austrians is. Could it be that the Italian king intends to send a signal of reconciliation with Austria? He didn't have much opinion on this because he couldn't rule Germany yet, but Carlo's words gave him a lot of inspiration. You must know that his grandfather William I and Prime Minister Bismarck were both pro-Russian, while his father Frederick III was anti-Russian under the influence of his wife, Princess Victoria. Shortly after William was born, a fierce conflict broke out over the constitutional struggle between the conservatives, represented by the then Prussian King William I and Prime Minister Bismarck, and the liberals represented by the Prince couple, later Frederick III and Princess Victoria. This awkward power structure will inevitably lead to a conflict in William II's educational philosophy. On the one hand, he is pro-British and liberal-leaning, focusing on the importance of public interests. The other side is pro-Russian and conservative, focusing on aristocratic values and the cultivation of military skills. His mother, Queen Victoria, worked hard to instill in William II a passion for the sea, Britain and freedom, and tried to replace his father, who was busy with military affairs, to take full responsibility for the upbringing of the children. However, the king and queen were also trying to exert their own influence on William II. So this also created William II's complex character, but because he was influenced by both parties, it also brought convenience to him. That is, he could move between his father and grandfather with ease, acting as a lubrication between the two agent. Of course, William has now shown his character flaws, and Carlo, the king of Italy, felt this. Because Carlo is the king, His Excellency the Emperor's grandson didn't show much, but he often showed his arrogant side in front of other people. But the arrogant grandson of the Emperor was impressed by Carlo's questions and answers. I didn't expect you to answer like this, Carlo. It's really surprising. It's nothing, but as you said, consider it from a German perspective. Carlo said this and suddenly had a new idea. I heard that the Chinese ordered 2 Saxony-class ships right away from you. Yes, this is business solicited by Vulcan Shipyard, for which our country has also given preferential treatment. Seeing Carlo mention the Chinese building warships, William II didn't know what Carlo thought, but this matter was also very glorious for the German shipbuilding industry, so William didn't care. If we have time, how about we go take a look? Carlo's proposal surprised William. He did not expect that the Italian king would be interested in these 2 ships. You must know that Italy's shipbuilding capabilities are much stronger than Germany's today. Although William II was a little surprised, although he had been on many warships in service, he had not seen much of the warships being built, and he happened to be interested in taking a look. Okay, then, let's go to the Vulcan shipyard tomorrow. After Carlo and William II came to an agreement, the hunting activities came to an end. After the two returned to Brandenburg for a short rest, they started chatting again. In the evening, Carlo returned to Charlottenburg Palace in a happy mood. However, when Carlo returned here, he found that the atmosphere of the delegation was very depressing. What's wrong? Facing Carlo's inquiry, someone immediately told the reason. The reason was that diplomatic negotiations with Germany were not going well. Although Germany was very grand at the welcoming ceremony, the bottom line of the negotiations remained unchanged, claiming that Italy should reach a friendly agreement with Vienna before discussing military alliances. For this reason, Prime Minister Depretis became a little angry and returned to his residence to complain about the German stubbornness. Carlo has absolutely no way to intervene in the negotiations between Germany and Italy, but he believes that there will be a way. He should prepare to go to the Vulcan shipyard with William II tomorrow. Chapter 56 Visit to Germany. 3. Essen is 126 kilometers away from Berlin in a straight line, and is crossed by the railway from Berlin to East Prussia. Since the 12th century, the city has become one of the most important and powerful seaports on the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. It was also the site of the Empress Yeka, the birthplace of Telenovai Point. Since this is an important seaport, the shipbuilding industry must be very developed, but the most famous one is the Vulcan shipyard. The factory is located on the banks of the Oder River, with an area of 100 hectares. The shipyard has 9 large and small docks, the most eye-catching of which is number 34, where the Saxony class improved and Tranquility second ships are being built. On this day, Liu Buckhan got up early. After some exercise, he happened to see the figure of Wei Han, who came with him. Brother Ji Qian, you're up so early. Wei Han, who was stopped by Liu Buckhan, looked at the sweat stains on his shirt and said with a smile, "It's not early for me, but it's early for you, Zixiang. You've already practiced this. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm used to it. If I don't practice for a day, I'll feel uncomfortable all over." The two chatted for a while and then dispersed. After washing up, they started a new day's work. Yes, the two of them are the people in charge of receiving the second ship of Jinping Liu Buchan is responsible for leading the selected naval officers and soldiers to familiarize themselves with the two warships, while Wei Han is responsible for supervising the construction of the warships, so they need to go to the Vulcan shipyard every day to keep an eye on it, not daring to relax at all. When the two visited the Vulcan shipyard, they found that the atmosphere in the shipyard was very wrong today. The workers in the shipyard were busy cleaning, and not many people were working. Both of them knew some German, and upon seeing this, they immediately pulled over a person in charge and asked, "How is this going? Some big shots are coming to inspect today." The news they received from the shipyard personnel did not make them pay much attention. It's not like they haven't met big figures in Germany. They remember that, when they first arrived, they were received by the German Deputy Minister of the Navy. But it didn't take long for them to realize how naive their ideas were. Several carriages, accompanied by escorts, arrived at the shipyard. Major Gilbert, the person in charge of the shipyard, immediately led his people to greet him. "I've met His Royal Highness the Emperor's eldest grandson, and I've met His Majesty Carlo." It was an emperor's eldest grandson and the king who came, which surprised them both. Yes, these were William II and Carlo. After getting off the carriage, they talked with Mr. Gilbert for a while. Carlo's sharp eyes saw two oriental faces standing aside, so he pointed at them and asked, "Is this a representative of the King dynasty?" "Yes, His Majesty King Carlo. They are Liu and Wei, the representatives of the King dynasty in the factory. Can we invite them over? We just want to visit the warship they built." "How can we do this without the owner's consent?" "Of course there's no problem." So, Liu Buchan and Wei Han saw Gilbert, the person in charge of the shipyard, waving his hands and shouting to them loudly, "Liu and Wei, please come over here." The two people who were called in front of them for no apparent reason opened their eyes in disbelief when they heard that an Italian king and his eldest grandson were going to take a look at the warship built for them. However, Liu Buchan acted quickly, replied immediately, "Of course there is no problem. It is a great honor for our country to allow you two to visit the warship." Although Liu Buchan spoke stumblingly in German, everyone still understood him, so Carlo then replied, "Thank you for your permission." So, after joining the two king representatives, the group walked toward number 34 dock. "This is the Saxony class improved ship number 1 and number 2 we built for the King dynasty. Currently, the hull of the number 1 ship has been completed and is ready to be launched and outfitted. The hull of the number 2 ship has also been built 85%. It is expected to be completed in 3 months. Get in the water." Arriving at the dock, Gilbert introduced the current status of the two warships to the two distinguished guests. Looking at the two unfinished warships, Carlo asked, "Can we go up and have a look?" Gilbert replied immediately after looking at Liu Buchan and Wei Han, "Sure." So, a group of people boarded the number 1 Ingenuity ship, which was about to be launched. Standing on the deck that had not yet been painted, Gilbert continued to diligently introduce its performance to the two of them. The ship has a standard displacement of 7,220 tons and a full load displacement of 7,670 tons. It uses a 3-cylinder reciprocating steam engine. It is propelled by twin propellers and is equipped with 8 boilers. The main guns are 4 305mm breech guns produced by Krupp, and the secondary guns are Krupp 2 150mm breech loading guns. Gilbert then introduced information on fish, speedboats, and armor equipped by warships. Inexpensive. Although Gilbert's words are lavish, this does not change the fact that it is a second-class ironclad ship. Among them, the main gun design of the two Xingping ships is very unreasonable. They are equipped with 305 retractable guns, all installed on the front deck. Although they adopt a left and right staggered design, they do not meet the needs of future naval battles at all. This will reduce the accuracy of its firepower against the rear. If an enemy comes around to the rear, this class of warships will be difficult to deal with. Of course, this is also Carlo's perspective from later generations. In this era, we have not experienced large-scale naval battles of ironclads, and it is normal for designers to not know what the ironclads need. Your country's warship construction technology is not inferior to ours at all. I believe that in the future we will definitely see the German fleet dominate the oceans. Of course, William II who came with him, knew that Carlo was speaking for his own ears, but just listened to the praise. He would not take it seriously. You must know that Italy has built a 10,000-ton first-class armored ship, but Germany currently does not have that capability. Carlo, you are exaggerating. The current strength of the German Navy cannot do this. No one else could get involved in the conversation between Carlo and William II, and could only serve as a background. Of course, there were two more Chinese figures on the background point. Of course, when Carlo and William II came to the Vulcan shipyard, they could not leave. After seeing the second ship Tranquility, they still had to see other ships more or less, so the hard-working Sir Gilbert took the two of them to the shipyard. Go somewhere else. Point. As for Liu Buchan and Wei Han, they naturally stopped following them. Point. Looking at the group of people walking away, Liu Buchan always felt something was wrong, so he asked Wei Han, Ji Qian, why do you think the eldest grandson of the Kaiser brought the King of Italy to see the second ship of Tranquility? Wei Han, who also had no idea why, opened his mouth to suggest something to him. Zixiang, how do I know this question? Why don't you report it to Master Zhangtang? Master Zhangtang is so busy, how dare you bother me with such a small matter? Liu Buchan shook his head like a drum. He would not report this matter. Maybe it was because someone else was interested and just took a look. Okay, Mr. Liu has revealed the truth. Point. I'm asking for a recommendation vote, but I don't want it to drop too much. For the sake of 2 new steamed buns, readers, please give me some. Chapter 57 Turning Point. Please recommend and collect. If Carlo was having fun while traveling around the mountains and rivers, then the Italian delegation negotiating in Berlin was as aware of the heat and cold as if they had passed through the cold winter. These Germans stupid. The angry Prime Minister Desperatus walked in with a murderous look. He closed the door to his room with a snap sound, which made the remaining members of the delegation look at each other. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Bacona, who came in later, didn't look very good either. He seemed to be very popular with Germany. Since the Prime Minister was at the forefront, no one wanted to avoid being affected. Pop. There was another heavy slamming of the door. Since these two people couldn't be offended, the people who took notes and translated along with them naturally became the target of contact. So everyone gathered around and asked what was going on. It turns out that today's negotiations are still not going well. The Prime Minister played most of his cards, but the Germans are still unmoved. They still propose to let Italy and Austria reach reconciliation before they can sign a military alliance. They say they don't want to see the future. Two allies clash and find themselves in a dilemma. Your uncle is in a dilemma. He obviously pays more attention to the Austrians and does not believe in the strength of Italy. How could Desperatus, as the Prime Minister, not see this? So he has his angry side. But despite being angry, we still have to talk about what needs to be said. There is no way. After the British Empire made it clear that it does not need Italy as an ally, the only choice now is Germany. As for negotiating with the French and Austrians, unless he wants to be overthrown by the people, it is impossible to negotiate with them. However, if he wants to reach an alliance with Germany, Desperatus feels that he needs time, but he just doesn't know if he can wait until the time he wants. But no matter what, we still have to talk. Who makes Italy weak? It can only find an ally to scare potential enemies. Thinking of this, Desperatus calmed down and opened the door and walked out. Convene a meeting with everyone immediately and let's study how to negotiate with the Germans. Now, Italy needs friends. The previous crisis in Tunisia showed how dangerous it is to have no friends. In addition, Italy's strength is at the bottom among the major powers, which makes it even more dangerous. And if you want to increase your strength, you need the help of allies. While Desperatus was worried about the lack of progress in the negotiations, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Berlin was still working normally. Koch was a telegraph operator in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, responsible for sending and receiving telegrams. Although this position is inconspicuous, it is extremely important, so the selection is also very strict. Personal strength, family background and other aspects need to be examined. Needless to say, Koch's personal strength is that he graduated from Cohen University and has a very good resume. In addition, his father and grandfather both served in the army, and his grandfather was killed on the battlefield, and his father was injured and disabled as a result. This family background made him stand out from countless people, and became a telegraph operator in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are only a dozen telegraph operators like him in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They are in charge of their respective regions, while Koch is responsible for sending and receiving telegrams from Russia and Northern Europe. On the night shift that day, after Koch handed over to the telegraph operator on duty, he first checked the normal operation of the telegraph machine as usual, then flipped through the duty form, and checked other items. At this time, the telegraph machine indicator light came on. He quickly put down his work and immediately received the telegram. When he received the telegram, he immediately felt suspicious, because it was a coded telegram. The code number was sent back from St. Petersburg, and the recipient was Count Wysoka, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Koch immediately realized that this was an urgent telegram, or one that had to be translated by Foreign Minister Count Wysoka himself. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he immediately rang the bell and someone rushed over. Give this telegram to His Excellency the Foreign Secretary. Okay. After Koch finished all this, he immediately marked the time and level of receiving the telegram in the record book for future inspection. The Chancellery is the busiest department in Berlin, because many things require the Prime Minister to make decisions, so it is not an exaggeration to say that Prime Minister Bismarck was worried about Germany. Even if there were diplomatic negotiations with Italy during the day, His Excellency Bismarck still had to brace himself and walk around the Prime Minister's office to look at the matters that were handled today and which ones needed to be dealt with urgently. For Bismarck, a veteran in politics, dealing with these matters was like eating and breathing. It became an instinct of his body. He felt that if he did not deal with affairs one day, he would feel uncomfortable all over. So when the lanterns first came on, Bismarck was still sitting in his office processing the documents in front of him. Bang, bang, bang. A knock on the door interrupted Bismarck's thoughts. Who? What? Prime Minister, your wife called to urge you to go home, saying that today is your granddaughter's birthday. After hearing the secretary's words, Bismarck remembered that he had promised his granddaughter Hannah to attend her birthday party when he went out today. Okay, I understand. Wait for me for 15 minutes. After replying to the secretary, Bismarck buried his head again. But soon, there was another knock on the door. What's wrong? Didn't you tell me to give you 15 minutes? Bismarck, whose thoughts were interrupted, yelled out the door with some dissatisfaction. It's me, Prime Minister. Count Wysoka's voice came from outside the door, and the foreign minister sounded a little anxious. Come in. When Count Wysoka came in, Bismarck looked at the foreign minister in front of him in surprise. The main reason is that this image has changed drastically from before. His messy hair and clothes soaked with sweat all show the embarrassment of the foreign minister. What's going on, Wysoka? Bismarck asked the foreign minister in front of him with concern. I'm fine. Faced with the prime minister's inquiry, the foreign secretary ignored the politeness and immediately took out a translated telegram from his pocket and placed it on his desk. Prime Minister, you'd better take a look at this first. Bismarck was a little surprised by the foreign minister's move. Maybe something big had happened. He didn't care to continue asking. He picked up the telegram on the table and read it at a glance. What are these Russians thinking? What do they take us for? Bang. This is the sound of slamming the table, and the old prime minister exudes anger. It was all because of the content of this telegram that made Prime Minister Bismarck extremely angry. This telegram from St. Petersburg was urgently sent back by the embassy. In the telegram, the ambassador to Russia learned that French Prime Minister Jaafari, who was visiting Russia, had reached a secret agreement with Russia. With the help of enthusiastic personnel, the ambassador to Russia obtained its contents. Don't doubt the extent of Germany's penetration in Russia. You must know that the wives of Tsars have always been German. The agreement stipulated that France and Russia should maintain good neighborly and friendly relations, and the two countries guaranteed that there would be no hostilities within 10 years. Although this was a peace treaty, and there was no mention of Germany in the contract, who was Bismarck? How could he not know who this peace treaty was aimed at? It can be said that this peace treaty tore a hole in the Three Emperors Alliance treaty negotiated last year. It is not that the Russians did not know the intention of the Three Emperors Alliance, but they still signed such a peace treaty with France, so its intentions are worth mentioning. People doubt point it seemed that something had to be done for this. Thinking of this, Bismarck had an idea. Point, gentlemen, please give me some recommendation votes. If you don't ask for it for a day, this thing will fall down. Chapter 58 German-Italian Military Alliance, please collect and recommend. A new day has begun, but the Italian delegation temporarily staying at Charlottenburg Palace did not feel the new beginning. Point yesterday, the meeting chaired by Prime Minister Despretis and the Foreign Minister lasted until late at night, but the discussion for a long time failed to reach a result. I have already thought of all the ways I can think of. What else can I come up with, now that we are all together? But even so, everyone had no choice but to comply with the leader's request, and no one dared to complain. No one is stupid. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister are currently at odds with each other. Anyone who dares to complain may be angered, so we can only suffer with the two big shots. Fortunately, the two big shots finally lost their temper and they were able to go back to the house to rest, otherwise they would have had pandarized today. Point therefore, the entourage following the two adults today are not very interested. After all, they have been talking for so many days, and they still can't see Germany's attitude. But despite this, they still have to make a last-ditch effort. Point in the second carriage, Foreign Minister Bacona complained with Prime Minister Despretis, who was sitting in the same car next to him. Such negotiations will hurt everyone's morale. It seems that the Germans are not planning to let go. It seems that His Excellency Bacona has also been affected. Even this person who has worked in diplomacy for many years is somewhat affected by pessimism. As Prime Minister, Despretis is no exception. Work hard, at least we have to try our best. Well, Despretis's words didn't sound like words of encouragement at all, but instead seemed like he was seeking relief. Point it's just that fate played a big joke on them at this time. The imaginary enemy far away in St. Petersburg, the French delegation gave them an invisible assist. When the carriage arrived at the Prime Minister's office for negotiation, Despretis immediately felt the difference. Foreign Minister Bacona next to him also had the same feeling. His Excellency the Earl came out to greet us personally, which made us even more frightened. In line with the principle of diplomatic reciprocity, Bacona immediately stepped forward to greet them. With a smile on his face, he thanked German Foreign Minister Wiesecker, who greeted his group. Point you must know that this person had never waited for them at the door during previous negotiations, which made the two people obviously feel different. There, as your country's friend of Germany, I, the Foreign Minister, should greet you. Wiesecker also smiled and casually characterized Italy as a friend of Germany. Point the two foreign ministers chatted casually, as if they had been friends for many years. After the Italian negotiating delegation got off the bus, they walked to the conference room of the Prime Minister's office under the leadership of Count Wiesecker. When they arrived at the conference room, Despretis and Bismarck exchanged a few words and then started negotiations. Everyone, we in Italy, are sincere enough to discuss with you this time. In order to show our goodwill, let us first state the conditions. Although he felt that Germany's attitude was different. In order to avoid possible misjudgments, Despretis planned to test Germany's attitude first. So he took the documents he had prepared and began to report Italy's conditions. In order to strengthen economic exchanges between the two countries, I think the tariffs between the two countries can be appropriately reduced from the current 25% to 18%. This will help the economic development of our two countries. In addition, we also, Despretis, then also gave Germany considerable convenience in investment, education, cultural exchanges, tourism, and personal exchanges. It can be said that this is basically the biggest concession that Italy can give. If Germany still does not agree, then the alliance will not be concluded. So after Despretis finished speaking, the Italian delegation was waiting for Germany's reply. Your Excellency Despretis, we feel Italy's sincerity, and our country naturally wants to achieve a more comprehensive and friendly relationship with your country. When Bismarck said this, the Italian delegation present felt a thump in their hearts, and there was a hidden secret However, the issues between your country and Austria need to be resolved. We don't want to see the two allies quarrel over this, leading to an irreversible situation. Yes, the German Prime Minister said before that it was over here, which made many people in the Italian delegation feel weak and felt that the negotiations with Germany had not progressed at all. But what Prime Minister Bismarck said next surprised them. So, I believe that mediating the issues between your country and Austria can better promote the relations between the three countries. Therefore, our country intends to act as an intermediary to help your country and Austria reach a result that is acceptable to both parties. Well, Bismarck's explanation of Germany's previous behavior shocked many people, but the meaning he expressed made the delegation ecstatic. Although they didn't know what happened in the middle, it was at least beneficial to Italy, and even the smile on Prime Minister Deprotti's face is more sincere. Thank you for your country's willingness to act as an intermediary to mediate the dispute between our country and Austria. This is really very good news. Facing the gratitude of the Italian people, Prime Minister Bismarck did not say much and went straight to the topic. Let's talk about cooperation between your two countries first, and then Count Wiesacker will take you to Vienna to negotiate with Austria. No problem. Let's thank Mr. Earl first. It's okay, this is what I should do. Well, after first clearing out Austria, which was stuck between the two countries, the alliance negotiations between Germany and Italy went smoothly. One was willing to accept it, and the other was eager to find allies, so there was nothing to hinder it. So in the next 3 days, the two countries reached an agreement mainly on military diplomacy, and finally reached a total of 8 articles, the main contents of which are: the contracting parties promise to maintain peace and friendship with each other, not to join alliances or agreements against any of them, and to exchange views on general political and economic issues that may arise, and to provide support to each other. If Italy is attacked by France, Germany must provide aid to Italy with all its troops. If Germany is attacked by France, Italy must bear the same obligation. When one or both of the contracting states are attacked and engage in war with 2 or more major powers that are not signatories to this treaty, all contracting states shall participate in the war at the same time. When a major power that is not a signatory to this treaty threatens the national security of one of the contracting states and that contracting state is forced to engage in war with it, the other contracting states are obliged to remain neutral towards their allies and reserve the right to participate in the war when appropriate. If the peace of any of the high contracting parties is threatened under the circumstances envisaged in the above articles, the high contracting parties shall consult on military measures to be taken with the aim of ultimately cooperating. The contracting parties undertake that, if they participate in the war together, they will never conclude an armistice, peace or treaty, unless they unanimously agree. This fresh treaty was signed by Kaiser Wilhelm I Carlo, who rushed back in an emergency, and was made in triplicate, with Germany and Italy each keeping 1 copy. As for the extra share, it is reserved for the Austrians. I believe that with Germany's persuasion, His Majesty Franz Joseph will make a wise choice to sign his name. 2 chapters. Mantow wrote 2 chapters in his busy schedule. Readers, please give me some recommendation votes. Chapter 59, 3 Kingdoms Military Alliance. Please vote for favorites and recommendations. Vienna is the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the art capital of Europe. Countless artists are trying to leave their names in Vienna, including Haydn, Mozart and Beethoven, as well as Schoenberg, Webernenberg, etc. It's a familiar name. Of course, in addition to music, there are also many famous buildings here, such as Stephen's Cathedral, Hofburg Palace, Schönbrunn Palace, Stephen's Cathedral, etc., which are all good places for people to linger. Of course, these scenery are common to Viennese people, and only those bumpkin from the countryside will exclaim and marvel. As a Viennese, they have their own pride. As the birthplace of the Habsburg family also made every effort to build Vienna. This is one of the reasons why Vienna has become the most famous big city in Central Europe. However, as the master of the city, Franz Joseph is now a little irritable. There are several reasons that make him irritable. One is that his wife, The famous Princess Sissy has not contacted him for a long time. You could write a book about the problems between the two, a failed counterexample of what the husband should do in the struggle between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. In addition, there is also the oppression of other ethnic groups by Hungarians, which caused protests that made him very distressed. For this reason, he gave comfort many times and also advised Hungarians not to treat other ethnic groups so harshly, but these Hungarians just did not listen. The other thing is the troubles caused by Germany and Italy. A few days ago, Prime Minister Bismarck sent a telegram from Berlin announcing that he had formed a military alliance with Italy and was willing to mediate between Italy and Austria-Hungary on the Tyrol issue. Although Bismarck did not say it explicitly in the telegram, the Austro-Hungarian government was very aware of the warning implicit in the German telegram. That is, Italy and Austria should stop the topic of territorial disputes in Tyrol to ensure harmony within the three countries. Of course, the imperial government in Vienna could not ignore Germany's intentions, and Franz Joseph immediately held a cabinet meeting to discuss Germany's intentions. However, after some discussions, no result was reached. The reason is very simple. The Austrians need each other more than Germany, especially when they need to exert their influence in the Balkans. Without the support of Germany, they will not be able to reach a conclusion at all. No match for the Russians compared with the huge interests in the Balkans. The Tyrol dispute with Italy is not worth mentioning. Besides, this land is still in the hands of Austria-Hungary, which is even more beneficial to Vienna. The previous delay in reaching an understanding with Italy was more due to the loss of control of northern Italy and resentment over the loss of Venice. You must know that the Habsburg family has existed in northern Italy for hundreds of years, but it was lost at the drop of a hat. Who can bear this? Besides, if Italy had won it with strength, there would be no reason to say that their skills were inferior to others, and there was nothing they could do about it. But Italy gained these territories more through opportunistic siding and the help of others, so don't let others take it seriously. But now that Berlin has spoken, Vienna must listen carefully to the other party's suggestions. This naturally made Franz Joseph very unhappy. You must know that the Habsburg family has always been the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Although it has long lost this title, it is still considered the recognized boss in the German region. Although he was later defeated by Prussia, he was still strong. Now being ordered by the other party like this, he felt somewhat unbalanced. Fortunately, Franz Joseph still had some sense and did not show excessive behavior. Speaking of the founder of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, there is something tragic about him. But anyone who has studied his life will know that he brought this upon himself. This man made a series of diplomatic mistakes, offending France, Russia, and Prussia. It was this that forced the Kingdom of Austria to form the Austro-Hungarian Empire with the Hungarians. In addition, in domestic affairs, he gave too many rights to Hungarians while ignoring the needs of other ethnic minorities, causing numerous domestic ethnic problems. At the same time, he is not qualified at all when it comes to handling family relationships. In the fight between his wife and his mother, he didn't know how to adjust. Although he had an extraordinary memory and acumen in understanding people, his strategy in diplomacy could not be compared with other outstanding personnel of the period. The only thing he was praised for was that he was rigorous and loyal to his duties. This evaluation was very good for an official, but it was a failure for a monarch. Therefore, His Majesty Franz Joseph, we can call him a diligent monarch. As for the fact that he remembers more than 10 languages, this does not help him improve his ability to govern the country at all. So Vienna had no choice but to accept Germany's proposal and sign an alliance treaty with Italy. Of course, it couldn't be done in a day or two. It took 5 days. On the first day, as usual, the Austrians held a welcome dinner. Franz Joseph personally welcomed the Italian delegation and had a cordial conversation with King Carlo of Italy. The next day, the Italian delegation, led by the German foreign minister, sat at the negotiating table with the Austrians for negotiations, the main content of which was to shelve their claim to the disputed region of Tyrol. This issue was discussed for 3 days. At the suggestion of German Foreign Minister Count Wiesecker, the two countries reluctantly reached a consensus. Neither side claims sovereignty over the Tyrol region, but the region is still under Austrian rule. At the same time, Vienna stated that it will treat local people living in Tyrol equally, whether they speak Italian or German, and will not treat them any differently. After the temporary settlement of the Tyrol dispute, alliance negotiations between Italy and Austria-Hungary officially began. But the discussion went very quickly, because Vienna had already been considered during the previous German-Italian negotiations, so there was no need to worry about many details. Besides, this did not cause Austria-Hungary to lose anything. Instead, it eased its relationship with Italy, allowing the two countries to no longer focus on their borders, but instead invest more in other directions, which is a good thing for both Austria and Italy. So, after talking for a day, both countries felt that they were almost at peace, and finally Carlo and Franz Joseph signed their names under the alliance treaty. This also means that Italy has joined the military alliance between the two countries in order to give the obedient Austro-Hungarian Empire a sweet date. After the Italian delegation left, German Foreign Minister Count Wiesacker hinted to the Vienna government that Germany was willing to support Austria-Hungary's actions in the Balkans. Of course, Carlo, who returned home with the Italian delegation, did not know about this, otherwise he would have exclaimed that there would be trouble in the Balkans. Sorry, I'm too busy today, so I can only update one chapter. I hope readers will forgive me. Chapter 60 Maxim, please collect and recommend. New York is the largest city in the United States and the most prosperous city in the United States. Since it is the most prosperous metropolis, various new technologies will also be used. First point, for example, the New York City government was very prescient in the use of electric lights. They chose Edison's electric lamps as their lighting choice in the municipal lighting bidding meeting in 1880. This also made Edison famous and brought electric light into the eyes of more people. Since there are winners, there are also losers. Among them, Maxim was the most unsuccessful. The gas lighting lamp he invented originally participated in the municipal government's bidding, but was defeated by Edison in various ways. Not only that, after Maxim's bid failed, Edison used various methods to force him to sell the company and threatened him to leave the United States. This is historical fact. Edison's method of clean killing was extremely uncomfortable for Maxim. You must know that Maxim is not an unknown person. His family is a descendant of the Hugo family in France. After being expelled from France to the United Kingdom, he moved to Plymouth, England, and Massachusetts, the United States. But even so, he was still no match for Edison or Morgan, who stood behind him. So after selling his company, Maxim was thinking about his own way out. A friend of his had given him a clear path before, jokingly, put aside your chemistry and electricity. If you want to make a fortune, just invent weapons. This can make you a lot of money. The friend's words were a joke, but Maxim listened. You must know that he has been studying automation since he was a child. When he first started a business and opened a flour mill, he was both the director and the only employee. He succeeded in an automatic mousetrap. Later, he invented the automatic fire extinguisher at a Linfu company. Let me add that the current automatic fire extinguisher still uses Maxim's principle. During this time, Maxim locked himself at home and used his talent for automation to design a variety of drawings for automatic rifles and automatic pistols. However, these designs did not bring him any profits because they were not commercially produced. Due to lack of money, Maxim considered this and planned to develop a fully automatic weapon mechanism as a stepping stone for his own weapon development in order to make his name known throughout the world. Yes, Edison's actions irritated Maxim, and he also wanted to attract the attention of those big shots. Bang, bang, bang. There was a knock on the door, disturbing Maxim, who was immersed in work in the room. What's going on? Can't you just let me be quiet for a while? Faced with Maxim's complaints, his wife's voice came from the door. Okay, stop complaining, Hiram. It's Hudson here. Don't you want to meet him? Hudson's full name was Hudson Maxim, the younger brother of the owner of the house, Hiram Stevens Maxim. He himself is also an inventor, but his research direction is in explosives, and he is also relatively well known in explosive research. Hearing his brother's arrival, Maxim opened the door and walked out. However, his image is not very good. He has no clothes for a long time, a beard that has not been taken care of for a long time, and red eyes. No matter how you look at it, it is far away from the word sloppy. What is Hudson doing here at this time, facing his wife looking at him with disgust? Hiram Maxim asked curiously. It's not like my brother doesn't know his situation clearly. He had warned Hudson before that he needed to concentrate on his own research point. And why did the younger brother arrive in such a hurry at this time? Hiram Maxim was arranging his clothes, thinking about the arrival of his younger brother, and then his wife gave him a message. By the way, your brother also brought 2 friends. Okay, I know. After replying to his wife, Hiram Maxim walked downstairs. Hudson, long time no see. Why did you come to visit this time and brought 2 friends over? After Hiram Maxim hugged his brother, he asked what he wanted. Let me introduce you. These 2 are from Italy. They came specially to invite you to Italy. Under the introduction of his younger brother, Hudson Maxim, the 2 visitors stood up and introduced themselves. Hello, Mr. Hiram Maxim. My name is Darlan Pavan. My name is Rob Lister. We are from Italy. What's happening here? Hiram Maxim, who was a little confused by the 2 visitors, couldn't help but ask. One of the thin visitors said, let me tell you, that's right, Mr. Hiram Maxim. We originally came to look for you, but unfortunately we didn't know your address. Then we found your brother, and he led us here. Oh, that's right. After hearing his explanation of his purpose, Hiram Maxim continued to ask, I wonder what you 2 want from me, Mr. Hiram Maxim. We heard that you are researching automated weapons. We in Italy are very interested in this, so we want to invite you to Italy. Of course, this is also the meaning of our King Carlo. He thinks that people like you are like talents should not be buried. For this reason, our country is willing to provide you with financial or other support. Having said this, he also took a look at the house where Maxim lived and continued. In addition, our country is also willing to pay you a monthly salary of 2,000 lire. Of course, we also know that this salary does not reflect your ability. For this reason, we have also prepared an agreement. As long as the automated weapons you developed are sold, whether it's physical goods or technology licensing, you can get 20% of the profit. This condition cannot be said to be ungenerous. It can be said to be a reward for a top weapon designer. Many weapon designers dare not think of it like this. Of course, this is not because Carlo has too much money to panic, because although Maxim is very embarrassed now, he was considered a rich man before, and Italy was not among his options for traveling to Europe. If you want to win over this epoch-making weapons designer, it will be difficult to tempt him without offering him a reward that is irresistible. Unexpectedly, after talking about the reward, Hudson Maxim standing next to him opened his mouth wide and showed an expression of surprise. But he had never been rich before. Hiram Maxim said after hearing the reward, thank you to the Italian side for considering me highly, but please allow me to think about such a big matter for 2 days. It doesn't matter. We live in the Waffle Hotel not far from here. If you think about it, you can tell us at any time. After seeing off the 2 visitors, his younger brother, Hudson Maxim, couldn't help but speak. Brother, absolutely no one in the United States can offer such conditions. I know. After replying to his brother, Hiram Maxim continued. At least let me know who these people are. I can't believe anything just because of what they say. Compared with his younger brother, Hiram Maxim is much more sensible. At least he needs to know whether these 2 people are really representatives of the Italian government. Chapter 61. Even more powerful than a tiger. Mr. Maxim, welcome to Italy. In the small living room, Carlo stepped forward and shook hands with Maxim, who was still in a daze. It's no wonder that Maxim looked like he had never seen the world. The main reason was that his experience during this period was a bit too unreal. I think he went from being kicked out in the United States to being warmly welcomed in Europe. There was a huge contrast. Few people can guarantee that they still have a normal mind. Originally, Maxim commissioned a friend to investigate the 2 men. It turned out that they were indeed from Italy, but they were not from the government, but from the royal family. This news is great for Maxim. Since the 2 visiting people were really representatives of Italy, Maxim naturally gave up his plan to develop in the UK. After all, he was not familiar with the place in the UK, so a sincere invitation from Italy would be better. So Maxim then agreed to come to Italy to work and for this purpose he also brought his family with him. The Italian side was also well prepared for Maxim's arrival. It immediately prepared a first-class cabin on a luxury cruise for him. When he arrived at the port, he sent an attendant to greet him and asked his family to board the royal carriage and immediately take him there. Sent to Rome. It is impossible for the Maxim family not to appreciate the care they received along the way. So the first time he saw Carlo, Maxim immediately expressed his gratitude. "Thank you for your majesty's interest in me. My family and I are extremely grateful for such a grand reception. It's nothing. This is the treatment you should receive." Facing Maxim's thanks, Carlo was naturally very familiar with the situation and knew how to deal with these people. Then we started chatting with him. "I heard that your family is from the Hugo family." "Yes, your majesty. Can you tell me? I'm curious how you moved to the United States." It is rare for a monarch to be interested in his own family history. So Maxim talked about his own family history. From the time their family was expelled from France to settling in the United States. And Carlo also played the role of a listener very well. After hearing that they were expelled from France, he showed an angry expression. When he heard that they could not stay in the UK and had to cross the ocean to the United States, he showed a sad expression. Finally settling in the United States, after coming down, he showed a happy expression. In short, Carlo has become very good at this and can make the people he talks to feel good. Of course, not everyone is qualified to make Carlo a listener. Currently, only Tesla can do so, and now Mr. Maxim is added to the list. After the two chatted for a while, Carlo got down to business. "Mr. Maxim, you know the purpose of this invitation, right?" Faced with Carlo's question, Maxim replied, "I'm certain." "Then, I want to tell you a little bit more. This invitation comes from the royal family, so it is somewhat different from the government invitation. First, the automated weapons developed by you need to enter the eyes of the military before they can be produced." Yes, Carlo needs to explain the difference between the royal family and the government first. Although the two seem to be no different, the actual situation is still different. If the royal family invests, they will not be so stuck in funding, and it will be easier to obtain financial support. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. That is, weapons bidding will be strictly compared. If a better choice appears, the government or the military will not give in, because it is a royal industry. Carlo informed in advance that in addition to avoiding possible misunderstandings in the future, he also had plans to consider for himself. A monarch with high moral character is more popular, especially in Italy, which lacks talents. This is especially true because Carlo can still remember the names of some famous people. "Thank you, His Majesty Carlo, for informing me. I have confidence in myself and don't mind competing with other weapons developers in your country. If others are better than me, then I have no regrets. As a developer, Maxim has his own pride, and he doesn't mind this. You must know that in the United States, there are not so many rules and regulations. If it works, it will work, and if it doesn't, it won't work." Hearing Maxim's words, Carlo smiled happily. "Mr. Maxim, I also believe in your ability. You will definitely develop a work that will surprise the world." After talking for a while, Carlo continued, "Mr. Maxim, I have prepared a small welcome dinner for your arrival. I hope you can accept my kindness." Carlo's words moved Maxim a little. He was not from a humble background, and he had some understanding of the situation in Europe. Asking a monarch to host a reception dinner for himself is no ordinary courtesy. "Your Majesty, this is really grand. Your kindness and generosity will be admired by the world." Faced with Maxim's gratitude, Carlo planned to make another splash. "I remember that Mr. Maxim's family was originally from a noble family, right?" "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Our Maxim family is not born into aristocracy, nor has it ever been before." Although he didn't know why Carlo asked this, Maxim told him truthfully, "That's right. I'm sorry, I remembered it wrong." Carlo apologized, then changed the subject. "I personally think that filling in the title of nobility for the Maxim family can better reflect your ability. You must know that many people born as civilians have been awarded the title of nobility because of their contributions to Italy. I hope that the Maxim family can also have this honor. Carlo's words couldn't be more straightforward, and Maxim naturally understood them. His Majesty at this time, Maxim didn't know what to say, and his tone was already a little stumbling point. Don't underestimate the desire of common people for nobles in this era. In the 21st century, every time the Queen knights you, it is reported in the newspapers, and a group of melon-eating people discuss it lively. Not to mention that now, this noble title is more than just honor facing the grateful Mackin. Carlo felt very satisfied, because he had gained a top weapons designer for only a small amount of money. There was no more cost-effective deal than this. Later, Carlo held a small dinner for the Maxim family in the palace. Although the nobles present did not know what was special about the Maxim family, they had been struggling for so many years. How could they not know how to deal with it? So this made the Maxim family, who had never experienced this kind of treatment, feel as if they were in a dream. Even when they left, they felt walking lightly. In the following days, Maxim received many interviews from Carlo. After staying for 3 days, Maxim left Rome with a grateful attitude. Because he needs to go to Brescia next, because there is a small arsenal invested by the royal family here called Beretta Arms Company, and Maxim will serve as the chief designer of the company. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62. Frightened? After arranging Maxim to the Beretta Arms Company in Brescia, Carlo happily planned to continue his efforts and find several famous figures to bring him to Italy. However, his poor knowledge reserve limited Carlo's performance. After racking his brains, he only remembered world-famous great scientists. Now these people are all treasures of their respective countries, and their research is basically theoretical and of little use to Italy, so in the end he chose to give up. After all, I don't have Beidou with me, so I can find whatever I want. The main reason for Maxim and Tesla is that they are too famous and are still in their infancy. Such talents are too rare and too rare. Now that he has given up the idea of collecting scientists, Carlo can only continue to go to school. Yes, Carlo is still a student, and he is having a wonderful time in school. Although there are several teachers, he is the only student. In addition to going to school, Carlo had time to hold hands with the maid, hug her and feel the fragrance of the girl's body. Then he went to Milano to see Tesla, who was so busy, and Maxim, who quickly got into work. He lived a happy life. Boring again. However, compared with Carlo's carefree boredom, Despotis as prime minister is much more tired. As prime minister, he is now busier than before. On the one hand, after the signing of the three-nation military alliance, more capital came from Germany. In addition, as one of the terms, Germany will provide Italy with some military technology. Although some of this needs to be taken over by the military, he always needs to take care of it, so everyone in the prime minister's office is now walking fast and busy with their own work. How is it accepted by the military? Prime Minister Despotis, who had just finished processing a document, looked up and saw his secretary standing next to him and immediately asked. The Secretary of the Army, General Saragat, sent a message that many of the military technologies provided by Germany are outdated, and the military is somewhat dissatisfied with this. After hearing the news, the Prime Minister rubbed his swollen temples with his hands and then gave instructions. Tell Admiral Saragat to choose something that can be used, and don't complain. We all need to build trust first, okay? If there's anything else, just tell me. The other thing is that the National Railway Company sent a telegram. They said that the construction of the railway from Palermo to Messina is more difficult than expected due to the terrain, and the budget is estimated to be insufficient. They hope that the government can allocate another 6 million lire to their construction funds. Hearing this, Despotis looked over. How is this going, Secretary? Usopp, who was glanced at by the Prime Minister, secretly cursed the railway company before continuing. According to the railway company's report, there is a section of the railway that needs to be reinforced because it passes through the collapse area, which they did not expect before. As he spoke, he took out another document. This is the list of additional budgets for the railroads. Despotis took the list, read it carefully, and signed it. Leave it to the Ministry of Finance and let them allocate funds, but they need to send someone to supervise the use of this money. Clear. After answering, Secretary Usop turned around and prepared to leave. Wait a minute. The secretary, who was stopped by the Prime Minister, immediately asked, "Your Excellency Prime Minister, is there anything else? What has Your Majesty been doing recently?" The Prime Minister's topic made the secretary tremble inside, but he still answered truthfully. "According to what I know, His Majesty has been traveling to Merino and Brescia recently outside of classes. It seems that Our Majesty attaches great importance to the two people he has recruited." At this time, Secretary Usop only hated himself for having ears, but fortunately, the Prime Minister let him go, and the secretary disappeared like a rabbit with a whoosh. Seeing the scared secretary running away, the Prime Minister smiled and said nothing. "My secretary is good at everything, but she is too timid." But it was precisely because of his timidity that he was chosen. Of course, when he asked the king about Carlo's movements, he didn't have any thoughts, but it was just a normal inquiry. After all, he was the Prime Minister and he always needed to know the king's movements. Carlo, who was asked about his movements by the Prime Minister, had just returned to Rome from his trip to Brescia. However, as soon as he arrived in Rome, his attention was immediately attracted by a piece of intelligence from the Far East. This information was sent by the Italian minister to the King dynasty. Although the minister did not know why His Majesty paid so much attention to the information about the Far East, he still continued to send back to the country what happened in the Far East conscientiously, so much so that the embassy and the King dynasty only served to convey the information. The news cost more than 100,000 lire in additional funds. This telegram stated that Chinese and French businessmen had agreed on terms for Vietnam. There are three main ones. 1. Vietnam pays tribute to China. China withdraws its troops, and France declares that it has no intention of occupying Vietnamese land or damaging Vietnam's sovereignty. 2. Vietnam opens up to maintain victory, the base area of the Black Flag Army. 3. China and Vietnam use the Red River as the boundary and allow the Red River as open to navigation. This information surprised Carlo. He remembered that the Sino-French War started 2 years later because of Vietnam, but what was the terms? It was obvious that they had reached an agreement. You must know that you made a bet in advance and prepared to cruise ships to surprise the French. Now that the surprise is gone, the shock is here. Yes, Carlo plans to intervene in the upcoming Sino-French War. This is not because he has feelings for me, the King dynasty. He has hated pigtail dramas since he was a child. The genius has feelings for the King dynasty. He covets the market of the King dynasty. But it is a pity to say that Italy is not strong enough and has no place to stay in the Far East, so Italy cannot achieve the gunboat diplomacy of Britain and France. Since you can't do it hard, you need to do it softly. If you want to be soft, you must have a good impression of Italy. Unlike Germany, which established its reputation as the first army in Europe with the Franco-Prussian War, Italy has a natural advantage. Then the upcoming Sino-French War is what Carlo thinks is an opportunity. This is the most beautiful war fought by the King dynasty. As long as Italy plays a sufficient role in it, the bosses who are based on the strategy of using barbarians to control barbarians will definitely not let it go. Friends suffer. When the time comes, we will take the opportunity to open up the market and rely on the westernization movement to find a way out for Italian products. In the end, Carlo had everything ready, but Dong Feng said it wouldn't come. Isn't this funny? Something must be wrong. Faced with this sudden information from the Far East, Carlo was at a loss for a long time. Don't be impatient. There will definitely be a way. You can wait and see. Carlo was very patient and planned to observe first before talking. The next news made him heartbroken. The French government did not approve the terms and withdrew Baohei, the minister to the King dynasty. It seemed that the Sino-French War was unavoidable, and Carlo was relieved. Asking for favorites, asking for recommendation votes. Chapter 63. The Brescia is launched. Genoa is Italy's largest port city and home to numerous shipyards. There are two powerful shipyards in Genoa. They are the Ottrode shipyard and the Andazol shipyard. Today, there was a lot of excitement in the Andascia shipyard. This was the day when Brescia, the second ship of the Venetian class, entered the water, so the navy and the royal family were present. Needless to say, the royal family must have paid for Carlo's attendance after all. As for the navy, because of Carlo's attendance, Admiral Garlock, Minister of the Navy, was also present in person. Of course, if Carlo did not come, the Minister of the Navy would also be present. After all, it is a 7,000-ton warship, which is a big supplement to the Navy. Since it is a launching ceremony, throwing champagne is also a repertoire, and there is no more suitable person than Carlo. Faced with the warships built with his own funds, Carlo was of course obliged to do so. With a smile on his face, he threw the champagne in his hand at the Brescia. With a bang, the champagne hit the bow of the ship and smashed it into pieces. Then, amid cheers, the dock's sea gate was opened, and the battleship slowly slid toward the sea. With a bang sound, the 1,000-ton warship stopped steadily on the sea. The waves it set off made the water undulate a lot, but no one cared about it now. The snapping sound of the camera was aimed at the launching warship and the handsome king, as if the film was being taken for free. Carlo endured the discomfort caused by the flash, but still showed a perfect smile for these reporters to take pictures. Of course, there was a time limit for taking photos. After 5 minutes, the reporter was asked to leave. At this time, Carlo breathed a sigh of relief. The successive flashes of magnesium powder made Carlo's eyes very uncomfortable. However, in order to show the perfect image of monarch, he could only brace himself. "Your Majesty, thank you for your hard work." After the reporters left, Navy Minister Admiral Garlock immediately offered money to compliment the young king. "Forget it, Your Majesty General. Why do I feel like I've been deceived?" Carlo's words made Admiral Gorek a little embarrassed. Yes, when the Venice was launched for the first time, the Navy made a fuss about him and greatly influenced the newspapers to report that Carlo participated in the launching ceremony of the warship. By the way, another wave of money was collected, but this time it was a lot of money from the young lady, because the photos at that time showed Carlo looking very handsome. This time Carlo obviously found that there were many more people taking photos than last time, and there were also people wearing Navy uniforms holding cameras and taking photos. This was so unprofessional, and Carlo felt like his IQ was being rubbed against the ground. Do you feel that you don't consider your own feelings at all? Hey. When faced with Carlo's responsibilities, the Navy Minister began to act stupid, but although he was pretending to be stupid, he still had to explain what needed to be explained. "Your Majesty, isn't this all caused by lack of funds? At present, our country needs to face the threat from France. You also know that the naval strength cannot compete with the French, so more funds are needed to build more powerful warships." Admiral Gorek is right. Previously, Italy's main imaginary enemy at sea was the Austro-Hungarian Navy, so the Italian Navy's shipbuilding plan was not rushed. However, after the Tunisian crisis, the imaginary enemy of the Italian Navy became the French fleet. The current French fleet is not weak at all. It can be said that it is the peak time of the French fleet, benefiting from the fact that the United Kingdom has not implemented the two-power standard at this time. France at this time the Navy is the closest thing to the British Navy. Facing the French Navy, which has not widened its strength gap with the British Navy, Italy's world's fourth Navy is simply not enough. How could this not make Admiral Gorek, the head of the Navy, worried? So finding ways to obtain funds became his primary goal. After all, no matter how we talk about tactics and strategies, ships are needed to execute them. Facing the crushing strength of the French fleet, no one in the Italian Navy knew this. Fortunately, France needs to deal with both the Mediterranean and the Atlantic at the same time, so the pressure is much less. But despite this, the Navy's shipbuilding plan has not slackened. This year alone, the Navy approved the construction plans for 4 large battleships, 2 of which are 10,000-ton battleships. However, Italy's financial situation is just like that. The funds allocated to the Navy cannot be compared with France at all. The Navy can only find its own way. When Carlo faced Admiral Gorek, he wanted to tell him that the French Navy would take the wrong path in the future, but even if he told the head of the Navy in front of him, he would not believe it. I didn't expect that the Navy was so short of money, and maybe it would be his help in the future. With this in mind, Carlo planned to test the Admiral's thoughts first. Your Excellency, if you can sell naval warships, you can get funds to build better warships. Your Majesty, this is a good idea, but the sale of warships is a big deal. The Navy cannot make the decision on its own. In addition, we in Italy cannot get involved in the sale of warships at present. The market is basically monopolized by Britain and France. I thought Carlo just wanted to sell old warships in exchange for funds to help build new warships. Admiral Garlick immediately spoke and explained to Carlo the basic situation of the current warship sales market. Of course, Carlo knew what Admiral Garlick said. Warship sales involve all aspects, not just the performance of the warship itself. Besides, given the performance of those old Italian warships, no one is willing to take over them. Carlo pointed it out directly. Your Excellency, Admiral, what I want to say is not those old battleships in the Navy. Your Majesty wants to talk about new warships, but who can buy these new warships at present? You must know that there are not many countries that have the ability to purchase these warships, and there are even fewer countries that are in need. I'm sorry I can't tell you this now, but if possible by then, I hope the Navy can accept the result of the sale. When Carlo said this, he pointed at the newly launched Brescia, implying that it mainly sells this class of warships. Admiral Gorek naturally understood what Carlo meant. Since His Majesty has said so, the Navy is naturally willing to accept it, but before that, we need to let our officers and soldiers get familiar with the warship, otherwise it will be very troublesome to operate it. Do you still need to hitch a ride with Italian naval officers, Admiral? Gorek could no longer remain calm and immediately asked, Your Majesty, can you tell me who we need to deal with? No wonder Gorek is so nervous. You must know that selling warships and selling officers and soldiers are two different things. Although it can be explained by retired officers and soldiers, don't think that other countries are fools. I'm sorry, Your Excellency, Admiral, I can't say now, but please believe that this will be of great benefit to the Navy. In addition, don't you think that, since the Battle of Lissa, our Navy has not gained actual combat experience? I hope that Your Excellency being able to send capable officers and soldiers to become familiar with these two ships will let the world know that Italy is not an object to be exploited. Carlo's words made the old general worry about gains and losses, but Carlo stood by silently waiting for him to digest his words. But whether it was because of the severe lack of money, the Admiralty Minister still asked, wouldn't it endanger Italy's security? Upon hearing this, he knew that the old Admiral's attitude had softened, and Carlo quickly replied, won't. Well, the Navy is willing to support His Majesty. Carlo smiled after seeing that he finally convinced the Navy. Next, we need to urge the shipyard to work overtime on the outfitting. As long as the outfitting is completed before June next year, we will leave half a year for sea trials, and for the officers and soldiers to become familiar with the ship's conditions. Then let the French take a look at the outfitting patrol power. Thinking of this, Carlo's face was filled with smile. Chapter 64 Selecting People. The arrival of a new year, the arrival of 1883, made Italians feel that the year was finally getting better. The economy recovered thanks to the government's efforts, and the diplomatic alliance with Germany and Austria meant that Italy finally had no shortage of allies. Although the relations between the three countries are not particularly close yet, this is a good start point of course, for Haldane Cosenz. His experience this year is enough to make him feel fulfilled. Now he is much darker than when he was in Palermo, and at the same time, his masculinity is also very obvious, which is consistent with he also has the same acquaintance with the former members of the Red Shirt Army and the current officers and soldiers of the 3rd Guards Regiment. The new year naturally calls for a new beginning, but before that we also need to give everyone a break. After all, we are humans, not machines. Haldane Cosenz also took up a pen and planned to write a letter to his father during this rare moment of rest. Father, everything has been fine with me for more than a year. According to your wishes, I did not reveal that I'm your son, but I feel that it does not matter whether I reveal it or not, because I have just been appointed as the acting company commander by my superiors. Although it is because of my outstanding performance, I still feel that there should be other reasons. But that is not what I want to say when I write to you. And not long after we were established, I heard the news that we need to transfer our people for training. although I don't know what to train for, but there is always a feeling that the red shirts are going to be promoted by us in another way. And I have been selected and will be sent to train again soon. Perhaps what your fathers did not see, we being able to see after Haldane Cossens finished writing the letter. He folded it and put it in an envelope, sealed it, and prepared to hand it to the post office to be sent home another day. Cossens, are you in there? A high breath caught his attention. Berry, what's wrong? Cossens opened the door and let his friend in. Although he didn't lock the door before this, Berry would have definitely pushed the door open, but he was taught the rules in the military camp. To enter the commander's room, he had to knock on the door. Although Cossens was not his direct commander, he could not be as casual as before. So now he usually calls his name at the door first, and if Cossens is there, he will definitely let him in. Cossens, why are you still in the military camp, and why don't you go into the city to have a look? Berry sat down on the bench carelessly and explained his purpose. I don't want to go. Although the city of Rome is prosperous, it's enough to visit once or twice. It's not as interesting as reading military books. I finally know why you were promoted so quickly. His friend Berry gave him a thumbs up to express his admiration. But don't underestimate Cossens' good friend. Although his position is not as high as his, it is not low either. He is currently serving as a platoon leader. The main thing is that he can get along with the soldiers and mobilize their enthusiasm. Of course, if he pays more attention with military books, there might be a chance of promotion point. But despite Cossens' refusal, Berry did not give up. Listen to me, Cossens. Do you know why I'm inviting you to Rome today? I don't know, and I don't want to know. Berry was stunned by the topic Terminator's answer, but he still didn't give up. I heard that the king is going to deliver a New Year's speech in the square today. Don't you want to go and see the excitement? Cossens did not answer Berry's words, and his friend, who felt that he had a clue, continued. I heard that many noble ladies are going to participate today. I think we should go too. Well, Berry's intentions have been completely revealed. But before Cossens could reply, another voice came from outside the door. Is Lieutenant Cossens here? I'm here. What's the matter? Facing the voice outside the door, Cossens immediately answered. The leader is looking for you. Okay, I'll be right away. Sorry, I have to go to the regiment headquarters and can't accompany you to see the noble lady in Rome. Cossens, who still did not forget to tease his friend, quickly tidied up his clothes and immediately left with the messenger, leaving his friend with a resentful expression on his face. Captain, look for me. After arriving at the regiment headquarters, Cossens immediately asked the regiment leader, who was standing in front of the map of Italy after being briefed. Yes, Lieutenant Cossens. Lieutenant Colonel Pulev turned his head and looked at him seriously and said, now I have a task that needs to be handed over to someone who is loyal enough to the country. Cossens, are you the person who is loyal enough? Yes, sir. I would make any sacrifice for Italy, even if there is a cliff ahead. I will also be fearless, even if there are boxes of treasure behind you. I wouldn't even look at it twice. Well, since you are so loyal to the country, I have a task for you. Please give the order. Lieutenant Colonel, pack your clothes and prepare to leave in 3 days. But I want to tell you that no one can talk about this, not even in sleep. Don't worry, I never talk in my sleep. Go ahead. During this process, Cossens didn't ask at all about being transferred to participate in training. I believe that the leader must have his reasons. After Cossens left, another person appeared in the room. This was the captain of the bodyguard, His Excellency Baron Filmic. He walked up to the lieutenant colonel and said, this is the commander you chose. Yes, your excellency. Although Pulev is a lieutenant colonel, he still does not have enough confidence when facing the captain of the guard. Of course, what's more important is that the captain of the guard came with a mission this time, and he was in a cooperative role. As for this mission, it is very simple. Lieutenant Colonel Pulev needs to select more than 30 people who are loyal and capable enough and hand them over to the captain of the guard. Yes, this task seems simple, but Pulev does not think it is simple at all, because the manpower requirements are not simple. In addition, the requirements for this matter are very hidden. Apart from the selected person, only the captain of the guard and him are known. No. It must not be simple to require such confidentiality point, but Pulev has no interest in prying at all. The less we know about some things, the better. Then Lieutenant Colonel Pulev summoned other people, and basically all agreed. Except for 2 people who hesitated. Everyone else was satisfied. Point. When Lieutenant Colonel Pulev summoned these people, the captain of the guard had been observing secretly. Point. After everything was done, His Excellency the Baron rushed back to the palace. Your Majesty, the manpower is ready, and we can set off in half a month. Chapter 65 Temple Gold, Part 1. The scorching sun was scorching the earth, causing a layer of mist to appear on the ground that had just rained, giving people a hazy feeling. However, as the sun continued to shine, the hot and humid feeling made people very uncomfortable. Cossens wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked up at the sky. Before he could speak, someone started to complain. Damn this bad weather. Stop complaining, Ethel. We are all equally hot and patience is a virtue. As the captain, McClellan taught this teammate named Ethel a lesson. Faced with all this, Cossens did not speak, but looked on with cold eyes. One more thing, a group of them disguised themselves as a scientific expedition team, and are currently in a small village, called Demilu near the temple. Thinking that he was in Italy more than a month ago and now in India, Cossens felt a little unreal. At first, he did not expect that this mission would be to come to India, but now that he has accepted this mission, he needs to go all out. So, when he was in Italy, he tried hard to understand the situation in India, and also learned some daily local terms. However, not all of them, more than 30 of them, were here. Because there were too many people, they were afraid of being too conspicuous. They were divided into 2 groups, dressed up as a scientific expedition team and a caravan respectively, and Cossens was in this scientific expedition team, serving as an escort. And now they are waiting in this small village for the arrival of another team disguised as a caravan, also a transport team. Since arriving here, Cossens has learned about the target. Their target is a Padmanabhaswamy temple, which was built in the 16th century on the order of the king of the kingdom of Travancore. Since its construction, the temple has been very popular and attracted many worshippers. Although the number of worshippers in the temple has decreased over the years, it is still quite prosperous. So, if they want to enter the temple, they must choose to do so at night. Of course, this needs to wait until they are reunited. Otherwise, if there is too much wealth in the temple, they will not be able to move it away. At this moment, a figure ran over. This was the man sent to contact the other team. Cossens remembered that his name was Pino. Pino, who was sweating profusely, panting and running to Captain McClellan, said, "Captain, the caravan will probably arrive here tomorrow evening." Upon hearing the news brought back by Pino, Captain McClellan stood up immediately. "Okay boys, now we have something to do." McClellan's words immediately caused the people present to gather around. "Ethel, you and Simon, let's explore the road tonight." The 2 people he named answered immediately. "Okay, boss." "No problem, boss. Remember, don't let people from the temple discover you." The 2 people who were warned by their words couldn't help but nodded, indicating that they were listening carefully. "Luna, Trish, and Cole, you 3 are going to observe the road conditions from the temple to the outside. You need to consider passing heavy vehicles." "Okay, got it." The combination of 2 women and 1 man immediately answered. McClellan then continued to arrange for the other people to observe all aspects of the temple, preparing to start taking action immediately after the transport convoy disguised as a caravan arrived. Cossens, who was standing aside, was not anxious about these arrangements at all, because their tasks were different, or in other words, they were more protective of the team's safety. Of course, it was impossible for them to do nothing else. After arranging everyone else's tasks, McClellan spoke to Cossens. "I have a mission and I need your help, please. Say, you are guarding the perimeter for us. If there is any big noise, then you need to rush in as soon as possible." "No problem." Now that the tasks have been assigned, everyone present immediately makes preparations. After it got dark, individual figures quietly bypassed the villages and headed towards the temple. The Padmanabhaswamy temple at night is towering and mysterious, and figures in dark clothes quietly approach the temple. A yawning monk guarding the temple patrolled the temple with a lamp. As a Brahmin temple, there will inevitably be donations from many believers, and in order to prevent malicious prying eyes, necessary protective power is also inevitable. However, these civilian guardians were no match for professionals. Where the monks did not notice, two figures slipped in unnoticed. The Padmanabhaswamy temple is not small, with several disconnected buildings, but these two figures seemed to have found the right target. After passing through the two temple buildings, they came to a somewhat dilapidated building. Stopped before. Look at the map. This is where it is. One person held a map, flipped through it for a while, and then pointed it out in a low voice. Then, let's be careful. The two of them carefully entered the building, which was densely carved with statues of gods, and in the center was the statue of the Hindu god burning heaven. After carefully observing it, the two were surprised to find that there was no one guarding it. So the brave two people immediately began to search everywhere. Bang bang bang. The two people who were carefully knocking on the wall suddenly heard a hollow sound. It should be right here. After one of them pointed it out, he continued to speak. I'll open it and take a look. No, we can't afford it. If it alarms others and causes the plan to fail, what are you afraid of? Just take a look. The other person was a little moved by what he said and stopped talking. So with the combined efforts of the two of them, they pried open the wall tiles and found that there was a hole inside. You look outside. I'll go in and take a look. Before his companion could answer, a thin man got in. After waiting for a while, the man came out with a disappointed look on his face. How's it going? What's in it? It's weird. There's nothing in there. It's so empty. How can this be? The other man didn't believe it, so he got in too. After a while, he came out with the same disappointed expression. After the two pressed the wall tiles back, cleaned up the floor, and then moved to the next place. When it was almost dawn, the members of the scientific expedition team gathered together again. Tell me, what did you observe? As the captain, McClellan immediately called everyone to understand the situation. We observed that there were very few people inside the temple at night. We have tested the roads and they are capable of carrying heavy carriages. After everyone finished speaking, McClellan looked at the duo who slipped into the temple and asked, tell me, what did you find? Based on the previous topographic map, we found 2 empty secret rooms. Including the 4 marked on the map, there are a total of 6 secret rooms. However, for fear of being discovered, we did not try to open these secret rooms. Very well, you all go down and rest. When everyone was about to get up and go back to rest, McClellan suddenly stopped Cossense. Vice Captain, wait a moment. Since he was stopped, there must be something important. So he waited until everyone else had left before Cossense asked, what's up? Do you have explosive talent in your team? I wonder if you have any way to use blasting without sound. This is okay, but you need to prepare the raw materials. It doesn't matter. I'll let someone buy it. I didn't want to make this bad deal, but Italy's foundation is too poor, so I'll make it. Chapter 66 Temple Treasure, Part 2. The moonlight tonight is very hazy, making people feel a dark and gloomy atmosphere. Coupled with the cry of the night owl, it makes people even more frightened at night. But outside the temple, a group of people were plotting. There were many people standing around them holding weapons and watching their surroundings vigilantly. In addition, there were more than 20 carriages covered with canvas. The transport vehicle disguised as a caravan arrived in the evening and was arranged here by McClellan himself. The nearly 40 people they brought naturally also gathered together. Dole, take your men and subdue the guards in the temple. Don't use guns. Just take them down one by one quietly. I don't want to see any unexpected situations. After taking control of the temple, Bill is optimistic about the signal. As soon as there is a signal, he will immediately drive the carriage. Come here. It was McClellan who was speaking, and he was assigning tasks to people one by one. The people responsible for subduing the temple, the people responsible for the response, and the people responsible for finding the treasures. The more than 70 people of Ling Ling Zong Zong were clearly arranged by him, and Cossense also sat next to him and listened carefully. Although he was still there was no arrangement for him. Without keeping him waiting long. After arranging the others, McClellan spoke to Cossense on the side. Now you take the people who can explode and follow me. As for the others, let's be on guard. As McClung finished assigning tasks, the people who had received the tasks immediately made preparations. Hooks, crossbows, buckles, cables, etc. were all hung on his body. After seeing that they were all ready, McClung waved his hand. Set off. So, a large number of people disappeared into the night. Cuckoo. The Padmanabhaswamy temple was unusually quiet at night. Except for the guarding monks, everyone was resting. A visiting Hindu monk walks through the temple holding a lamp. Suddenly a pair of hands stretched out from the darkness and grabbed his neck. With a click, the monk fell softly. The lamp and wooden stick in his hand also fell to the ground. After the monk fell, several masked men wearing night clothes moved his body away, including the fallen lamps and wooden sticks. Everything fell into terrifying silence again. Scenes like this happened all over the temple, and both monks and temple prostitutes were killed one after another. The attackers were cruel and clever, and many people passed away without knowing why. Of course, it is unrealistic to just kill everyone silently, so after a monk who woke up at night, discovered the intruder and shouted loudly, everyone in the temple was awakened. Since they were alerted, then don't worry about the means. So, when the monks armed with various cold weapons appeared in front of them, the attackers had already changed into firearms. After a burst of gunfire, the temple fell into silence again, with only gunshots and screams coming out from time to time. Fortunately, the temple was quite far away from the surrounding villages, so no one noticed the gunfire. However, the smell of blood could no longer be concealed. Okay, it's time for us to go in. Seeing the signal given in the temple, McClung immediately took Cossens and others directly into the temple. Dual, who was responsible for cleaning the temple, came over and reported with a bloody aura. A total of 37 people were dealt with. No, please be vigilant to prevent any fish from slipping through the net. After giving orders to his men, McClung spoke to Ethel beside him. Take us to the 2 empty secret rooms you found. Others will open the other 4 secret rooms and move away all the valuables. Call the transportation team to come over. Okay, Captain. So, under the leadership of Ethel, McClung and his team quickly arrived at one of the empty secret rooms. This time, everyone illuminated the secret room brightly. Everyone, look for it and see if there is any difference. After watching it, McClung immediately ordered others to look for anything unusual in the secret room. Captain, something is different here. It's good to have more people. And soon some people discovered the difference in the secret room. McClung rushed over immediately. As expected, there were differences here. There was a slight difference in color between a boulder and other boulders in the chamber. If you looked closely, you could see that the filling material for the small seams was also different. This huge boulder weighs several tons at first glance, and it is impossible to move it with human power. In the past, it would have taken a lot of effort and time, but in this era of rapid technological development, it doesn't have to be so troublesome. Although direct explosion cannot be used, McClung was prepared for it. In addition to Cossens and others, he also brought blasting masters with him. Cossens, ask your people to prepare to assist Bar in the explosion. At this time, Cossens' manpower will be needed, and Cossens will certainly not refuse. Okay, no problem. When Cossens, Bar and others were making preparations for the explosion, McClung, as the captain, certainly would not let others watch. Continue to observe and see if there are any other differences. As for Cossens, a few people quickly drilled holes in the rocks, then quickly put in the expansion agent, and then added water. A few minutes later, only a bang was heard, and the boulder was split into many pieces. This time it was much easier to handle. After a group of people moved the stones away, a dark hole appeared in front of everyone. Wait a minute. McClung grabbed one of his men who was eager to enter, took a torch from the others, and threw it in. The torch was quickly extinguished. There's a lack of oxygen inside. Let's wait and go in again. After waiting for almost half an hour, everyone entered. As soon as they entered Drew Cave, everyone was stunned. A large number of gold ornaments are piled up like a mountain, the most conspicuous of which is a small golden elephant as tall as a person. In addition, there are a large number of boxes piled up here. Everyone was mesmerized by this golden color. With fascinated expressions on their faces, McClung stepped forward and pried open a box. which was full of various gold coins. Have someone come in and prepare to move out. McClung's words made everyone at the scene look back. Although they were still a little reluctant, they also knew that this wealth did not belong to them. Then they moved the treasures onto horse-drawn carriages and transported them away. To do this, they demolished the temple gates to facilitate the entry of horse-drawn carriages. In addition to the secret room treasures discovered by McClung, there were also discoveries in other secret rooms. A large number of gold and silver coins and their products were piled up like mountains. The empty carriages responsible for transportation entered the temple one after another. When they went out, the axles of the axles were pressed. Got a crunch point. This situation lasted until dawn, and the fully loaded convoy drove away, leaving a mess on the ground. This time, more than 50 tons of gold and silver treasures were looted from the temple, which weighed down more than 70 carriages. Among them, there are more than 30 tons of gold and its accessories, and 20 tons of silver coins and their accessories. The most eye-catching one is a life-size golden Buddha statue. This statue of Buddha lying on its side on the body of a snake took a lot of effort to move onto the carriage. There are also a large number of diamonds and gemstones, also weighing hundreds of kilograms, with a total value of 600 million lire. Don't think it's small, it's 24 million pounds. This wealth is a great addition to Italy. Don't think it's too little, and don't judge it by its current value. If you think about it carefully, this is the cost of building more than 10 dreadnoughts. Don't you feel much better? Chapter 67 Meeting. As the closest port to Rome, the port of Antium undertook Rome's transportation tasks. As the capital and largest city of Italy, the city of Rome consumes a lot of money every day, and most of the supplies are transported through the port of Antium. After all, sea transportation is more convenient and cheaper than land transportation. Therefore, in the port of Antium, we can see all kinds of transport ships, whether they are the most modern steam hidden wheel cargo ships or sailboats from the age of discovery. You can see them here. The various items unloaded from these ships continued to nourish Rome. But today, at the military dock in Antium port, the docking of a ship was enough to attract attention. A large number of guards, officers and soldiers surrounded the port, and everyone else was driven out. At the same time, hundreds of carriages were parked together at the pier, which was so eye-catching. Yes, this is Cosenz and his team. Their actions in South Asia turned India upside down. After they left, believers who came to worship during the day discovered the tragedy in the temple, and word immediately spread among the locals. As one of the famous temples in India, Padmanabha Swami Temple is also very famous. Such a tragedy occurred in such a very famous temple. As the ruler, the British naturally would not sit idly by and immediately began to investigate. At this time, the convoy of Cosenz and his entourage would appear extremely conspicuous. As the captain, McClung made a prompt decision to disperse the huge convoy and set off through various roads towards the scheduled port of Umkita. McClung's choice was very correct. The British had determined that the people who attacked the temple were leaving with a large convoy. They immediately notified the states and asked them to inspect the large convoy, and the treasures were transported into more than a dozen small convoys. The convoy finally arrived safely at Umkita port. Although during this period, some people were a little shaken by the astonishing wealth, but in the end they still chose rationally. Of course, McClung's arrangement also played a big role in promoting this. Basically everyone was dispersed, and no one knew more than 3 people in the team. This ensured that each team formed a restraint and could let them have a good time to think about it while their minds are hot. In the following days, the convoys gradually arrived at the port of Umkita, which relieved McClung, who had decided to disperse. The treasures were then carried aboard the Bonhomme Richard, which had been waiting here for a long time. Then they circled Africa and returned safely to Italy. Their achievements cannot be overestimated, as this wealth was very important to Italy or Carlo. When they approached the port of Antium, the officers and soldiers of the guards were responsible for coming to meet them, so the officers and soldiers of the guards cleared the area. As soon as the Bonhomme Richard docked, the officers and soldiers of the guards immediately boarded the ship. And behind them were the captain of the guard, Baron Filmicki, and the palace steward, His Excellency Algid. Everyone, you have successfully completed this task. On behalf of the king and Italy, I thank you for your efforts. The captain of the guard, Filissimi, expressed his gratitude to these warriors who returned from India. Of course, he also knew that mere verbal thanks could not satisfy these people, so he continued, "In order to cleanse you from the dust, I have specially prepared a welcome banquet for you. There will be enough champagne and delicious food for everyone to drink happily. Of course, I know that this is not the case. It is not enough to reflect your achievements. In addition, each of you will receive a reward of 5,000 lire, as well as a knighthood medal issued by His Majesty. I believe this is enough to make your trip worthwhile, Feli." Mackey's words immediately made everyone who participated in the operation cheer. Giving money, giving honor, and giving respect, nothing could make them feel more satisfied than this. Of course, this is nothing compared to the wealth they brought back to the country, but they were all specially selected, who participated in this operation, just for the sake of wealth. After sending these people off the ship, Filmic and Alleged stood in front of McClellan and Cossens. "You did a great job. You lived up to my expectations. This mission was completed beautifully, and His Majesty praised you for it." Filmic patted McClellan on the shoulder and praised him. "Thank you for your praise. This is what we should do." The captain of the guard nodded with satisfaction, and then said to Cossens beside him, "Well done, Lieutenant Cossens. This is what I should do." After the same thanks, the palace steward Alleged stood in front of them. "Young men, I'm very proud of your behavior. In order to commend you two, His Majesty plans to invite you two to have lunch." Alleged's words immediately made the two of them look happy. Neither of them were fools. Compared with the previous rewards, this was the real big prize. This means that the king has remembered you. As long as they don't commit suicide, the great future will no longer be far away for them. Your Majesty, Baron, take them to see His Majesty. I will stay here and be responsible for transporting things to Rome. Your Majesty, as you wish." So, the captain of the guard rushed to Rome with the two lucky men in the carriage. Neither of them had ever had lunch with a king, so they asked carefully and used those etiquette. "No, Your Majesty is very easygoing and doesn't care about etiquette. Of course, I personally suggest that, in order to avoid the boring lunch, you can choose some exciting stories about your experiences in India to talk about during lunch." The two people who received the advice from the captain of the guard thanked them again and immediately discussed what needed to be said and what was not suitable to be said in front of the king. First of all, the bloodbath of the temple must not be mentioned. So, while the two were discussing, the carriage rushed back to Rome and came to the palace. "Okay, you two, His Majesty is still waiting for us." Taking the two rookies with him, the captain of the guard walked through the passage and came to Carlo's office point. After signaling to the two of them to wait a moment, the Baron knocked on the door. "What's up, Your Majesty?" "Two commanders who have returned from India are already waiting outside the door. Let them in." Then, the captain of the guard appeared in front of Carlo with two people. Then Macron and Cossens saw King Carlo. Although he looked like a young man, they did not neglect at all, and bowed to Carlo in a decent manner. "I have met His Majesty." "Okay, you two, no need to be polite. This time I took the liberty of recruiting you two to Rome in a hurry without having time to rest. In addition to celebrating you two, it is also to satisfy my little curiosity. We are deeply honored to be favored by His Majesty." Carlo's unpretentious attitude immediately won the favor of these two people. Then the two had lunch together at Carlo's invitation. Contrary to what they imagined, the king's lunch was no different from that of other wealthy families. Carlo looked at the somewhat restrained two people and spoke first. "Can you two tell me about your experience in India? I'm a little curious." "No problem, Your Majesty." After being prepared, the two people immediately told Carlo about their experiences in India. As they explained, and Carlo asked from time to time, the lunch lasted much longer than before. After finishing lunch, the two of them said goodbye very knowingly, and Carlo graciously asked the captain of the guard to take them away. Although they didn't talk about anything except eating this time, the two of them were very satisfied, and Carlo was also very satisfied. At least he remembered these two capable people. I forgot that there are still 65 chapters. It is very troublesome to modify it, so I will add another 67 chapters, which will perfectly solve, the problem of skipping chapters. Chapter 68 Dividers. Your Majesty, our current statistics show that this treasure contains 33.421 tons of gold, including 341 kilograms of various gemstones and 241 kilograms of diamonds, the largest of which reaches 67 carats. In addition, we have also cleared out many agates and Buddha statues. Carlo, listen to the palace steward alleged counting the specific data of this wealth. The long list was very impressive at first glance. Tell me the total value of this wealth. According to our estimates, the total value of this batch of wealth reaches 672 million lire, but there are too many religious symbols in it. Only 391 million lire can be sold directly, and the rest can only be sold slowly. Carlo understood what the palace manager meant. Currently, only 391 million lire can be used for this wealth. If you want to fully obtain the 672 million lire, it will take at least several years, especially those gold products with Hindu symbols. Now because of the bloodbath of Padmanabhaswamy temple, the whole of India is in turmoil. In order to appease these people, the British are trying their best to track down the murderer. At this time, a large number of gold coins with Hindu symbols appeared. Silverware. Doesn't this indicate who the murderer is? Unless he melts down the gold products with religious symbols and turns them into gold nuggets, it is impossible to sell them all. However, the consequence of doing so is that the value of these treasures will be greatly reduced, and Carlo is not willing to do this in this case. He currently has only 391 million lire at his disposal. However, Carlo does not plan to use these treasures now. It is thanks to the internet that he can know about this temple, a treasure. Of course, Carlo, like most people, only remembers first place and doesn't know who is second or third, let alone the others. He didn't know that he would encounter time travel. If he had known about it, he could memorize famous treasures from all over the world, like taking notes before an exam. Then wouldn't he have a lot of wealth that would be jealous of all the countries in the world? But there are no ice in everything, so when it comes to windfalls, Carlo knows this. Since there is only this windfall, Carlo must maximize its use value. This maximum use value is not only for Italy, but also for him. It seems to Carlo that only the alternating current system that Tesla is researching is eligible for him to use the money. So he is not in a hurry at all. He still needs to wait for good news from Tesla. Although Carlo was willing to wait, there was someone who didn't want to wait. The person who didn't want to wait was Prime Minister Despertis. Not long after listening to the report from the steward alleged, before Carlo could get over the excitement, a guard came over to report. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Despertis is here, please. Although Carlo didn't know the purpose of the Prime Minister's arrival, Carlo still needed to pay enough respect to this powerful Prime Minister. It's just that after Carlo heard what the Prime Minister said, he planned to withdraw the respect he gave him. Your Majesty, I heard that the guards have just been dispatched to protect a group of properties in Rome. Carlo did not intend to deny the Prime Minister's words, because it was impossible to hide this matter from others. Yes, because the amount of business my family made abroad was quite large. I asked the guards to protect it, although it was impossible to hide it from others. Carlo would not be stupid enough to admit that he had received a windfall, and it was a good idea to shift it to the family business. Faced with the explanation given by Carlo, Prime Minister Despertis stopped asking any more questions. He immediately picked up his words and said, Your Majesty, you know Italy's finances very well at present, because in order to reach an alliance with Germany, we made huge concessions on tariffs, so the financial situation is very bad. Carlo also knows what Prime Minister Despertis said. Last year, due to the reduction of tariffs, Italy's total tariff revenue dropped by 3%. Don't think this is a small decrease. You must know that last year, Italy's imports increased by 9.1% compared with the previous year. The largest increase was in goods from Germany, which increased by 17%. Since the imports from Germany exceeded the average, it will squeeze the commodity markets of other countries. Among them, France has experienced the largest decrease. Italy reduced its imports by 27% last year. Affected by the surge in imported goods from Germany, imports from the United Kingdom also decreased by 4.1%. Other countries have it. Moreover, behind the huge increase in German imports, it is not just Britain and France that have been harmed. Other countries have been affected to some extent, but it is not as obvious as Britain and France. In addition, there is another party that is also affected, that is, Italian companies. Currently, a large number of high-quality and low-priced German products are emerging on the market. Similar companies in Italy that previously received tariff protection have also suffered heavy losses. The number of companies closing in Italy is currently 3.7% higher than in previous years. Although this number is small, it means that thousands of jobs have been lost in Italy, which has an impact on all aspects of Italy. Although the Italian government can still deal with this impact, if German products continue to impact local Italian companies, it will be very difficult for the government to deal with it. Depretis is already a little worried about this. Carlo thought that the Prime Minister was here for the royal appropriation, so he immediately spoke. So the Prime Minister plans to postpone funding for the royal family. Italy's current allocation to the royal family is 15 million lire per year. Although it is not as good as other wealthy countries, it is good for Italy, so Carlo thought that the Prime Minister had this idea. Your Majesty is overly worried. It is the government's responsibility to support the royal family. How could I, as Prime Minister, make such a decision? Carlo breathed a sigh of relief at Depretis' words, but he was still too happy because the Prime Minister continued. Your Majesty, the government plans to issue a national bond to ease financial pressure. If the royal family can take the lead in setting an example, then everyone will surely feel His Majesty's kindness to the people. After Depretis finished speaking, he looked at Carlo expectantly. After all, Carlo was not as thick-skinned as the Prime Minister. Faced with the Prime Minister staring closely at him, Carlo couldn't bear it and asked, so, how large is the government's plan to issue this national debt? Your Majesty, the government plans to issue 500 million lire for this national debt. If your Majesty can buy 100 million or 200 million, he will be admired by the world. 1 or 200 million. Carlo looked at the Prime Minister with shameless eyes and a face that was concerned about the royal family and wanted to spit on his face. You must know that the royal family has purchased national debt before, basically just a few million lire as a show. Unexpectedly, Prime Minister Depretis actually asked for 1 to 200 million lire. Why didn't he grab it? Although he couldn't say this, Carlo felt that he couldn't hold back his anger, so he said it coldly. I'm sorry, I have to live up to the Prime Minister's expectations. At present, the royal family cannot afford that much money. This can only be done if the royal family sells off its properties. But if you want to sell 1 to 200 million liras, the Prime Minister may have to wait for 2 or 3 years. Faced with Carlo's cold rejection, Prime Minister Depretis was not angry. He just shook his head and said, actually, your Majesty doesn't have to go to so much trouble. You only need to sell part of the treasures obtained from the temple, which will be enough to raise 1 or 2 million lire. The Prime Minister's words made Carlo stare at him. Faced with Carlo's cannibalistic gaze, Depretis accepted it frankly, and the atmosphere in the room became more and more depressing. Although Carlo stared at the Prime Minister, he kept thinking in his mind about which joint went wrong and let the Prime Minister know about it. Although Carlo does not think that the Prime Minister has the courage to make this matter public, it is still a very troublesome matter after all. Think about it, and you will know how much damage it will do to Carlo if the news of a monarch looting temples in India spreads out. Of course, it will also damage the image of Italy. It caused a sensation not only in Europe, but also around the world. And this incident will definitely be recorded in history, and the damage to Carlo will be even more serious. However, considering that time was running out, Carlo gave up thinking about what went wrong. This could be discussed later. Now the priority was to cover up this matter. The royal family can only contribute 80 million liras, which is the limit of what we can contribute. No, I think the royal family can afford 150 million lira. Soon, the two entered into bargaining mode and finally reached an agreement on a price of 110 million lire. Depretis left the palace with a satisfied expression, followed by an angry Carlo. In fact, being discovered by the Prime Minister is also the reason. As the most powerful person in Italy, he naturally needs to pay more attention to the monarch, not only openly but also privately. Then develop a hidden line from Carlo's attendants. It's not a big problem, but this hidden line doesn't know the specific value of these treasures. They just know that many cars were transported, and they were basically gold and silverware. Point of course, this news was also known to Depretis. The Prime Minister, who was struggling with the fiscal deficit, thought it was an opportunity, so he used this news to defraud Carlo. Carlo, who was not experienced enough, did not cheat. Bottom exposed. Point in the end, he still suffered the loss of experience, but on the other hand, he gained nothing. At least he divided the money, so the Prime Minister has the obligation to ensure that the news cannot be known. This incident was completely covered up, and the only thing that was damaged was the shrinkage of funds in Carlo's hands. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Gunsmoke over the Far East. Carlo, who was given a large amount of his money by the Prime Minister, was naturally unhappy. I was depressed for several days because of this, and even the little maid who had been teasing me didn't hold hands for several days. When he was thinking about his mistakes, Carlo reflected more than once that he was still not calm enough in doing things. He would panic when encountering unexpected situations. The Prime Minister deceived him, and in the end, he couldn't help himself. What's the difference between the squirting Zhang and the prodigal son? Of course, as a keyboard warrior, I criticized young Master Zhang in all aspects on the internet. He has been imprisoned since he quit the Northeast, pointing out his various incompetences. I didn't expect that I had made the same mistake, which was really embarrassing. This also proves the saying, easier said than done. In order to avoid the recurrence of previous mistakes, Carlo reduced his time out and strengthened his reflection on himself. After all, Carlo was an ordinary person before. After suddenly ascending to a high position, he became a little arrogant after enduring for a period of time. However, Prime Minister Depretis gave Carlo a gentle slap this time, which just woke Carlo up. Let him know his character flaws. So during this period, not only did Carlo not run to Brescia, but Marino also went there less often. Carlo's performance made Maxim and Tesla think that there was no progress in their research and development, and that they had disappointed their friend the king, so they worked even more sleepless and forgetful. But although Carlo went out less frequently, he was still well informed. For example, Karl Marx, the leader of the proletariat and the author of Capital, died in London on March 14th. A generation of founders of communism passed away like this. Of course, after Carlo saw this news, he sighed more. Now who can imagine how many followers the communist theory he created will have in the future? Of course, this is not the news that Carlo is most interested in. The news that he is most interested in comes from France. Jaafari, who had previously planned to annex Tunisia, was once again elected as French Prime Minister. Although this man had greatly increased his prestige by annexing Tunisia, the failure of his economic revitalization plan made him step down in despair at the end of 1881. Of course, among them there are also reasons why he supports Franco-German reconciliation. Subsequently, in just over a year, France had 3 prime ministers, from Freycinet, Duclic to Fallier, all of whom stepped down due to various reasons. This can be seen in the impact of France's frequent changes of prime ministers. In the election in January this year, Rouffari was elected again. This time, this senior colonialist set his sights on Vietnam. He first asked the parliament to reject the Vietnam Clause signed with the Qing dynasty, and finally trumpeted the importance of Vietnam to France. In addition, he also let newspapers report extensively on the persecution of Christians and French missionaries in Vietnam, which aroused the anger of many French people, and then used this power to promote the Parliament's invasion plan of Vietnam. So, when Carlo got the French invasion plan for Vietnam, he immediately realized that the opportunity he had been waiting for had arrived, and he would definitely let the French know how powerful Italy was thinking of this. He immediately called the captain of the guard. How are the Venice and Brescia doing now? Faced with Carlo's sudden question about the 2 patrol ships, His Excellency the Baron quickly flipped through this information in his mind. Your Majesty, these two warships have been outfitted and are currently undergoing sea trials. Carlo was very satisfied with the words of the captain of the guard. It seemed that the two patrol ships had caught up with the progress and appeared in the Far East in time. Of course, Carlo didn't know that, in order to launch the two cruise ships as soon as possible, and Asha shipyard mobilized elite forces and adopted a rear-to-shift work system. Finally, at the end of March, the two cruise ships were outfitted complete. Because there were no electric lights installed, I didn't work at night, and there were no 3 shifts. At that time, high-power electric lights suitable for the shipbuilding industry had not yet been developed. Send a message to Admiral Gorek and let their navy familiarize themselves with the warship as soon as possible. It is expected that they will have a mission at the end of the year or next year. Okay, Your Majesty, Carlo just needs to wait for the war to break out before he has a chance to intervene. Carlo was not asked to wait any longer. There was news a month later, but the news was not friendly to the French at all. Captain Livier of the French Navy died in battle at a place called Paper Bridge in Vietnam. This naval colonel was also a bold guy. Before he could wait for domestic reinforcement, he led the French army to invade Hanoi, Vietnam, and threatened to invade China north along the Red River. But it is a pity that this ambitious and talented naval colonel failed to see the Chinese border. He had a conflict with the Black Flag Army stationed in Vietnam. The Black Flag Army is not simple. It was originally a peasant uprising army in Guangxi during the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Because it used the 7-star Black Flag as its battle flag, it was called the Black Flag Army. After the failure, it was transferred to the Sino-Vietnamese border mirror and was ordered by the King of Vietnam. Facing the invasion of the French army, the Black Flag Army, led by its leader Liu Yangfu, fought against it at Zikiao. As a result, the Black Flag Army won a great victory and killed the arrogant naval colonel and more than 200 French officers and soldiers under his command. When the news spread back to France, France was humiliated. The natives from the east actually defeated the heroic French officers and soldiers, and even the commander was killed. How could the proud French endure this? France then announced that it would send more troops to Vietnam and allocate 3.5 million francs to the French army in Tokyo to support them in continuing to prepare for war. Tokyo here refers to most of northern Vietnam. The Vietnamese call it Biki. It should be noted here that France had already occupied most of Vietnam at that time, and only northern Vietnam near the Red River was still under the rule of the Kingdom of Vietnam. France has always wanted to operate Vietnam as an advanced base, radiating to Guangdong, Guangxi in the southwest. However, due to the vassal relationship between Vietnam and the Qing dynasty, it has not succeeded for a long time. However, this time, the French were determined to solve the Vietnam problem in one fell swoop. At the same time, they wanted to open up the Qing dynasty's southwestern Guangdong and Guangxi markets to find markets for French goods. Therefore, this time France would not give up until it achieved its goal. Facing the news of the French's actions in Vietnam, Carlo looked like he was just watching a show. Of course, he would speed up preparations for small moves in private. Okay, here comes the content that everyone loves to hear. This is not only the Sino-French War, but also the first step for Carlo to take power. I know what I wrote before was a bit frustrating, and many people wanted to curse when they saw it, but Pig's Foot was just an ordinary person from the beginning. How could he become wise and powerful as soon as he traveled through time? He needs to grow and exercise before he can slowly improve himself. The wonderful curtain has now opened. I hope that book friends who like it will collect more and give more recommendation votes. Collections and recommendation votes are too bleak. Chapter 70 Contact. The Sangkao commercial office located near the mouth of the Sancha River is famous in Xianjin because Li Zongtang, the governor of Zili, the head of the world's governors, works here. Since it is the governor's office, it will definitely be bustling, let alone the governor general of Zili who also serves as a diplomatic errand. Moreover, the western view here is the largest in Xianjin, and many bold people who love to watch the excitement like to stay here. Why are the officials queuing up at the door in the dog days of summer? Despite the hot weather, they are fully dressed and almost have prickly heat, but they are still waiting at the door. There was also Sanjiushan, who was as cold as the third grandson, and still did not dare to leave for a while. Point of course, the best thing to watch is the training of the guards. They shout commands said to be taught by British foreigners, and perform various actions in a precise manner. This is when the idle men are most comfortable, because they can shout loudly and unscrupulously. If you applaud, you won't be afraid of people from the Yamen trying to slap you with a note point. But what they like most is when foreigners show up. Unlike the waiting officials, these foreigners can often go in directly without waiting. At this time, there are often those who are brave enough to spit and curse at the foreigners who enter. What are these foreigners so proud of? It will immediately attract a burst of applause and will be praised with thumbs up. At this time, the scolder was very proud, as if he had done something important that made Xianjin famous. At the same time, you can also take the opportunity to despise the officials struggling at the door. However, this is not without risks. Last month, Shandong, a small town in the west of the city, suffered a big loss because of this. People from the Yamen gave him a severe beating for insulting the French minister. That one was so miserable. When he was taken out, his buttocks were all bloody and bloody. He is still lying on the bed. According to the doctor, within 3 months, I couldn't even get out of bed. In the following period, there was a lot of silence at the entrance of the Sangkao Commerce office. But after all, the owner was restless, and after the storm passed, they surrounded them again. Today, another foreigner came to the Yamen gate, which immediately made a group of people look forward to seeing that good man who dared to stand up and poke the foreigner's arrogance. The old and young men staying outside the Yamen looked at me, and I looked at you, as if they were all waiting for a good man to come forward. However, when the foreigners entered the gate, no one came forward. Faced with this situation, many people secretly spit. Who are these people? Howard, who had just entered, had no idea what was happening outside the door. It's just that he was led by an official to an antique room. Mr. Howard, please wait here. The Lord is a little busy at the moment. He will invite you in a moment. Facing the official's proficient Italian, Howard thanked him in his reasonably proficient Chinese. Thank you. As he spoke, he took out a banknote from his pocket and handed it skillfully to the official's hand. After the official was surprised, he skillfully pocketed the banknote. I was surprised because he should have confiscated foreigners' banknotes before, but with his skillful skills, it seemed that he had collected a lot. After Howard handed over the red envelope, he calmly waited for the summons of Li Zongtang. In the study, Li Zongtang, then Minister of Commerce of Biang and Governor of Zili, was discussing his concerns with his confidant Zhao Fu, who was then the chief officer of Xianjin Customs Road and Xianjin Military Preparation Road. Yashin, we need to pay close attention to the fleet. The French are becoming more and more restless. According to Shaoshan's news from Europe, the French are bound to win Vietnam. Guangdong, Guangxi and Yunnan and Guizhou are in trouble. Li Zongtang, the founder of Biang, and known as a famous official in the late Qing dynasty, couldn't help but feel emotional about the recent actions of the French. Although Li Zongtang was famous for signing unequal treaties in history, he had to admit that this was not his fault. The country was weak and had no choice but to do anything. Of course, these emotions could not help the Qing dynasty reach an agreement with France on the Vietnam issue. Don't think that Li Zongtang is not well informed about European news. As the most popular Chinese official in Europe, Li Zongtang has his own channels to obtain information. Of course, we also know about the various actions of France in Vietnam. Of course, these matters mainly require the decisions of Zheng Liaojiu and other Hunan army figures. But the current situation in the Qing dynasty is still very serious. Needless to say, France, Britain, the United States, Russia and other countries are not easy to get along with. Even the Japanese juniors are acting stupidly when they see the situation facing the Qing dynasty. The country is in a difficult situation. While Li Zongtang was discussing with his confidant Zhao Fu, there was an announcement outside the door. My lord, Italian businessman Howard is here to pay a visit. Italian. After Li Zongtang heard the report outside the door, he was a little surprised because everyone in the governor's mansion knew that he had many things to do. So how could he allow businessmen to enter the governor's mansion, yet he actually reported it openly. So after Lord Zhang and his staff looked at each other, Zhao, a confidant, asked him what was in his heart. I don't know why businessmen are allowed to enter the governor's mansion, because of what's going on in the central hall. How unbecoming is this? After being scolded by Zhao, the official who felt that the banknotes in his arms were a bit hot replied immediately, because this businessman has the business card of Italian Minister Whirlwind, who said he was introduced by the Italian minister, so the villain did not dare to neglect, so he could only bring him in. The answer outside the door surprised Li Zhang and Zhao. An Italian businessman was recommended to them by the minister. Although Italians had little presence in the Qing dynasty, it must be abnormal for him to suddenly appear at this time. Therefore, faced with this abnormal situation, Master Zhang must take a good look at it. Then, what is that person's name? Howard, faced with the situation that the boss couldn't remember his name, the lower level officials took advantage of the situation and reminded him, yes, let that Howard come in. I want to see what this Italian wants to do. After a while, under the leadership of his subordinate officers, Howard saw Li Zhang sitting in the main hall. I have met the Deputy Prime Minister of the Qing Dynasty and His Excellency the Governor General. Faced with the situation where Italian businessmen spoke carelessly without knowing their official positions, Master Zhang would certainly not be indifferent to them. I don't know. Mr. Huo wants to see me. Is there something important? Although Li Zhang met Howard, everyone could hear the impatience in his words. If Howard doesn't have any news that interests him, then it is highly likely that he will be kicked out. Howard was not a fool. Of course he understood what Li Zhang meant clearly, but he spoke calmly and brought a shocking news to Mr. Zhang. Your Majesty the Governor, I have some connections in Europe. As a greeting, I would like to bring you some news. Howard's words made Master Zhang a little surprised. It was rare for a message to be used as a meeting gift. Then let me weigh you and see if your information is enough as a meeting gift. Okay, Your Majesty the Governor. The news I bring is that the Germans have agreed that if your country goes to war with France, according to the principle of neutrality, they will stop the transportation of weapons to your country, even if they have been ordered before. No, Howard's words made Li Zhang stand up immediately. Is this true? Li Zhang couldn't help but lose his composure because he understood what Howard meant. As long as it is at war with France, Germany will not let the two ships of tranquility return home. Thinking of this, how could he not be in a hurry? You must know that the core of Peng is these two giant ships. If they delay the time for the formation of the Peng Navy will also be delayed. This is not good news for Li Zhang, who leads the construction of the Navy. I dare not deceive His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister. This is the news confirmed by my friends in Europe. Li Zhang, who felt that he had lost his composure, sat back down and managed to say something. It seems that Mr. Huo has a wide range of friends. I don't deserve the praise of Your Excellency the Governor. I'm just well informed. So, what other news does Mr. Huo have to inform me? No more. Let me just say one more thing. I'm not an intelligence dealer. I sell various machines and equipment. Of course, if the governor is willing to be your friend, then I can also bring you some small arms or warships. But you need to pay a considerable amount of compensation. Is this true? Yes, Your Excellency Governor. As long as you have money, I can provide you with a first-class armored ship that is much more powerful than the Tranquility second ship, and can also provide it in stock. However, the cost is relatively high. Li Zhang understood what Howard said. It cost Peng a huge sum of money to calm the two ships. If he wanted to buy a more powerful warship, the money needed would be lost. With his current wealth, he couldn't afford it. But even though he couldn't take it out, Howard's words moved his heart. How can I put it this way? Mr. Huo's hands and eyes are very good. He doesn't seem to be an ordinary person. Your Excellency, Governor, you are overly worried. I'm just a small Italian businessman. As long as your country can pay enough, I can also recruit retired officers and soldiers to operate warships for your country to fight against the enemy. The second half of Howard's sentence seemed to Li Zhang just to brag, but the first half did let him know the origin of this businessman. It seemed that he needed to study next what grudges the Italians and the French had. Please, Li. Zhangtang raised his teacup and motioned to Howard Point. As a businessman in China for many years, how could Howard not know the purpose of this move? But his purpose had been achieved, so he stood up and said, "Excuse me, Governor, this is my address in Shanghai. If the governor is in need, you can come to me at this address." After speaking, Howard left, leaving Li Zhangtang alone in the lobby. Dang. Well, this Howard is no ordinary businessman at first glance. After Howard left, Zhao Fu walked out from behind the screen, point facing his many years of staff and confidence. Li Zhangtang stopped pretending and said with a wry smile, "Of course I know that this Howard is not a simple person. He can come to my head with the recommendation of the Italian minister. How can it be so simple? So, how does Dan Weng plan to deal with this Italian? Let's take a step and see. If what Howard said is true, we must let Zixiang and Jikan in Germany bring back the second ship of tranquility as soon as possible." Now, Li Zhangtang is most concerned about his calm second ship in Germany. If it is detained, there is really no good solution. Li Zhangtang's worries were irrelevant to Howard because he needed to visit several governors next, such as Governor Zheng Guoquan of Guangdong and Guangxi, Zhuo Zhangtang, Governor of Liangjiang, Hejing, Governor of Fujian and Zhejiang, etc. So he was pressed for time and could not continue to wait. One time. Of course, he now needs to let these State King governors know him first. As for future problems, he will need orders from Rome. Sorry, I checked a lot of information and can only code out one chapter today. I hope book friends don't mind. Chapter 71. Getting started. When Howard was prospering in the Far East, Carlo, as the man behind the scenes, was not very satisfied with his life point because he found that it was too difficult to push Italy to make small moves against France, and those experienced officials were simply unwilling to do so. Even among the young officials on his side, many are worried about this. He was deeply afraid of retaliation from France. The army did not take a position for some unknown reason, which made Carlo extremely helpless. Have all the blood of Italians been exhausted by the Roman Empire? But there is good news. That is, among lower level officials, there are many people who support taking measures against France. However, these people cannot affect the political trend at all. If the two sides are evenly matched, they can still play a role, but in the current situation, it is difficult for them to play a role. These people are really difficult to deal with. Carlo, who had just talked with Speaker Leslie, sat down on the sofa and complained about the government's problems. "Your Majesty, I think this matter cannot be rushed and requires patience." Baron Felicius, who had just seen off the speaker, saw the somewhat depressed king and immediately stepped forward to comfort him. Facing the persuasion of the captain of the guard, Carlo raised his head and explained, "Patience is not suitable for the current situation. This is a decisive battle for me. I can't lose. You understand?" It is obvious that Carlo is a little impatient now, but it is not his fault. Although he is only in his teens on the outside, he is a 30-year-old soul on the inside. He has tasted the taste of power, and of course he is not willing to lose it like this. In addition, for Carlo, who is familiar with history, the power in Italy should be controlled by himself. After all, such a strange thing happened to him during time travel, so he has a certain degree of arrogance. "Even if I'm inexperienced and my methods are not as good as those old foxes, I know the direction of history." Can they know this? No matter what, this time, I will push Italy to participate in the Far East. Seeing Carlo gritting his teeth to express his attitude, Felicimaki gave suggestions at this time. "Your Majesty, maybe you can ask His Excellency Allegid about this matter." Ask the palace steward. Carlo looked at his captain of the guard in confusion. "Your Majesty, His Excellency Allegid has served the royal family for more than 40 years, and is also acquainted with Prime Minister Cava." The captain of the guard stopped talking at this point, but Carlo understood. It seems that this old man, who is usually quiet, has so much experience before. Since the captain of the guard made it clear Carlo would certainly listen. Carlo appeared in front of him in the afternoon when the palace steward was resting. "I didn't expect your residence to be so frugal." Carlo was amazed by the palace steward's residence in the palace. A wicker chair, a small table, a standing wardrobe, and a single bed are the configuration of the palace steward's residence. Point regarding Carlo's visit. Alleged stood up and showed slight respect before telling the reason. It's nothing. It's just a habit I've had for many years. I don't want to change it when I get older. Looking at the frail old man in front of him, Carlo didn't know what to say, so he had to talk about the information he had learned. I only found out about the manager's past experience after hearing other people talk about it. It was really surprising. Your Majesty, the captain of the guard must have told you this. Faced with Carlo's words, Alleged did not deny it, but directly told the source of his information. That's right. If the captain of the guard hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known that the steward had such a great reputation. Carlo also did not deny it. This Felicity Mickey is really causing trouble for me. After the old man muttered something, he raised his head and looked at Carlo. I don't know, Your Majesty. What do you want from me? Facing the old man's inquiry, Carlo immediately told all the problems he encountered. That's it. After listening to Carlo's story, Alleged raised his own questions. Why is His Majesty so serious about intervening in France's plans in the Far East? There is a high chance of failure in doing so. Facing the old man's question, Carlo answered seriously. It's for the market. Market? Yes. Italy is currently facing a very unfavorable situation. Domestic industrial products are becoming more and more sluggish due to competition from Germany. If we don't find a solution, it will get worse and worse. By then, Italian industrialization is likely to regress. So find a market for it. It is urgent, and currently the only market that can accept and accommodate Italian industrial products is the Far East market. However, this market is greatly affected by its government, and we must gain its favor. So, your solution is to help France while it's fighting. What? Alleged hadn't finished speaking, was directly spoken by the old man. That's right. Carlo didn't deny it at all. Chief Alleged asked another question. Then have you ever thought about France's reaction after discovering our behavior? I have thought about it, and I have a solution. When asked, Carlo was quite confident. If France threatens war, then we will just show off the three-nation military alliance. Faced with Carlo's answer, Alleged did not give a reply, but continued to ask, what if they use tariffs and trade as a means? If this is the case, then we do not have no means of counterattack, but I believe the French are not necessarily willing to accept such a lose-lose result. Of course, if the French are stubborn, then opening up other markets can also help us tide over the difficulties. The key is Italian industry. There must be a way out for products, otherwise industrialization will be impossible. Carlo certainly knows that Italy's current exports to France are mainly various agricultural products and wine, which can make Italian farmers a lot of profits, but for the sake of industrialization, there must be trade-offs. Of course this is the worst case scenario, and Carlo doesn't think this will happen. Obviously Alleged also thought not, so he then said with satisfaction, now that His Majesty has gained confidence, I, an old man like me, will give my last effort on Your Majesty's behalf. Carlo, who got a happy result from the old man, left after chatting for a few more words. After Carlo left, Alleged picked up the phone and dialed a number. Hey, is this Bork? It's me. Yes, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. Let's meet at the same place then. It's been a long time since I tasted old Rooney's craftsmanship. I don't know if I've regressed. After putting down the phone, Alleged changed into dark clothes and put on a hat and went out. There is a coffee shop called Rooney's at the corner of Bonnier Street in Rome. This coffee shop has been around for some years. The neighbors who live here know this, and the old Rooney is a very good person, so everyone likes to drink coffee here. Today, an old carriage stopped in front of the coffee shop, and a grey-haired old man stepped out of the carriage. Seeing the customer coming, Rooney, the shopkeeper, immediately came up to him, but looking at the visitor, the old shopkeeper was a little curious. Who are you, Rooney? You can't even recognize me. You are Mr. Alleged. I really didn't recognize you. We haven't seen each other for almost 20 years. Are you okay? Not bad. Working as a housekeeper in a wealthy family. The old shopkeeper wiped his hands and quickly gave guidance. Quick, Please come inside. Please come inside. Give me a quiet place. I'll talk to someone later. No problem. Alleged was led to a corner seat by the window. It was not only quiet, but also unobtrusive, and could see the outside. It was indeed a good location. Rooney, how have you been these past few years? Thanks to your excellency. Life is not bad. I even have grandchildren now. That's good. Speaking of which, Rooney would also like to thank Alleged. At that time, his coffee shop was spotted by someone, and he used various methods to force him to resell it. Fortunately, Alleged, who was a customer at the time, stood up and stopped all this. So Rooney Sr., I have always considered him a lifesaver. Now that the benefactor whom he has not seen for more than 20 years has appeared, old Rooney must use all his skills to satisfy him. So, after chatting for a while, old Rooney resigned. He needed to go to the kitchen to prepare it himself. Alleged didn't wait long before an old man with the same white hair appeared in front of him. Alleged, if you are not retiring in the palace, why do you have time to invite me to drink coffee? The old man started talking nonsense as soon as he sat down. Book, if it weren't for your mouth, you would be sitting in the position of Minister of War. Alleged didn't say anything, but he immediately raised his voice when he mentioned the old man. You think I'm willing to say that they are all a bunch of incompetent guys? If I don't scold them, I have no idea what I'm doing. This grumpy old man's full name is Boris Balk. He has a very high prestige in the army. If he hadn't been foul-mouthed, he would have been able to take over as Army Chief of General Staff or Army Minister. But unfortunately, this man loves to troll. Although everything he said was justified, he still offended a lot of people, so he couldn't take these 2 seats. Okay, let's not talk about your business anymore. I'm looking for you this time to ask, isn't your army a hawk? Why don't you support His Majesty's plan? As soon as Alleged mentioned it, Bork immediately patted his thigh and said, I know this. Bork then told Alleged the reason in detail. It turned out that the reason why the military did not express its position was mainly due to the issue of the top military officials. They were worried about Carlo accepting the red shirts, so they were not very willing to support this matter. After hearing Bork's story, Alleged said somewhat dumbfounded, isn't Garibaldi dead? Are you still worried about the red shirts? Alleged knew very well that Garibaldi's feud with the army could fill a book. But with all the people gone, it's a bit incredible that the army is still in disgrace. Facing Alleged's incredulous expression, Bork's expression did not change. Of course we know that Garibaldi is dead, but some of the changes in the kings have worried many people. They hope to limit the red shirts to a certain range. After hearing Bork's words, Alleged's expression became serious. After taking a sip of coffee, he spoke. So how broad are the restrictions? It's best to limit it to the 3rd Guards Regiment. After hearing the conditions proposed by Bork, Alleged stood up immediately and then stared at Bork. This cannot be accepted. The conditions are a bit too much. They should not interfere in the affairs of the guards. You should know this, Bork said with a wry smile as he suffered the unreasonable disaster. I also know that this request is a bit excessive, but I'm just a messenger. You should stand up and express your opinion. Speaking of this, Alleged glanced at Bork meaningfully and said something. You must know that you are the kingdom's army. Your Majesty will eventually grow up. Bork, who was a little embarrassed when Alleged looked at him, had a dull expression and nodded. I think it is enough to limit the scope to the guards. Of course, the size of the guards cannot exceed 10,000 people, otherwise many people will be uneasy. I will report this condition to His Majesty, but based on my understanding of His Majesty, he will seriously consider it. After saying that, Alleged didn't even drink the coffee, immediately got on the carriage, and left. Rooney, who came out with 2 cups of carefully brewed coffee, looked at the empty table with a surprised expression. That evening, Carlo agreed to the army's request and limited the red shirts to the guards only and limited their size to less than 10,000. After Carlo nodded in agreement, the army also joined the camp that supported Carlo's proposal, immediately forming a pattern of military support and government opposition. This forced Prime Minister Desperatus to face up to this trend. You must know that the government is not monolithic, and some people agree with Carlo's proposal. Please collect and recommend. I feel like I don't have either of these, and I don't have enough motivation to code. Chapter 72 Showdown. What does His Majesty the King want to do? In the Prime Minister's office, the confidant Home Secretary Sabo was complaining to the Prime Minister. Now, the domestic anti-French demonstrations are being encouraged again. This is increasing the burden on the Internal Affairs Department. There is enough evidence to prove that this wave of anti-French demonstrations has the support of Our Majesty. Is it possible that His Majesty, Iron Man, are you determined to have a fight with France? As a Prime Minister, Sabo is naturally more or less pro-French. Although the diplomatic relations between Italy and France are currently deteriorating, there is still some hope. He hopes that the relationship between Italy and France will improve in the future. Of course, this mentality will not affect his daily work, nor will it provide convenience to France. Of course, what he said in front of the Prime Minister was not to represent his opposition to the anti-French demonstrations, but to remind the Prime Minister to pay attention to His Majesty's actions. You must know that during this period, due to the support of the military, the King's momentum increased greatly. Many young officials were provoked by his highly nationalistic remarks, which caused twists and turns in the diplomatic relations between Italy and France. According to the report of the ambassador to France, French Prime Minister João Ferry specially summoned him to raise concerns about the anti-French demonstrations in Italy, and gave him a private warning that, if Italy continued to be hostile to France would need to comprehensively consider its relationship with Italy. This incident made His Excellency the Prime Minister, who was already troubled by the military's intervention, even more angry. But His Majesty is still uneasy and praises these anti-French marchers everywhere, calling them the national backbone of Italy. Are those who oppose the law the backbone of the nation, while those who are busy putting out fires in the government are traitors. Therefore, everyone in the desperatist group felt resentful, and did not want His Majesty to continue talking nonsense. Of course, they have not thought of any drastic action. Italy needs stability, and whether the kingdom's remarks are out of line, let alone criticizing its patriotic enthusiasm. However, although there are no other measures, it does not mean that there is no way, and Sabo was elected by everyone to discuss with the Prime Minister whether to use other methods to calm the king for a while. For example, you can arrange a full schedule of courses to enrich His Majesty's knowledge. Faced with the words of his confidant, the Home Secretary, Depretis said calmly, "You're excited, Sabot, but, Prime Minister, alright." After waving his hand to stop the Home Secretary from continuing to speak, Depretis looked up at him and spoke. "I will handle this matter. If I think the military can make me bow my head, then I need to pay a corresponding price." Prime Minister Depretis' words made the Interior Minister in front of him light up. He stopped talking. The Prime Minister already had an idea. A few days later, it was time for Carlo to study government affairs again. This time is different from usual. In addition to the Prime Minister, Speaker and several cabinet ministers, there are also several other people, the most conspicuous of which are the two ministers of Navy and Army. Such an obviously different situation made several people feel that today's situation was unusual, and they made up their minds not to speak except for matters related to their own departments, and to just be spectators. "Your Excellency Prime Minister, why are there so many people today?" As the master, Carlo immediately asked after seeing that the situation was obviously different this time. "It's nothing, because there are many things going on today. That's why we called so many people." Carlo accepted Prime Minister Depretis' answer. But looking at the formation, there must be a battle next, so he had to keep his spirits up. "Your Majesty, shall we start now?" "It's time to start." After receiving the response, the Prime Minister took out a proposal and spoke. "This is about the railway construction plan from Cagliari to Sassari in Sardinia. Mr. Pedersen, please come out and explain it." The person who was stopped by the Prime Minister was Transportation Secretary Sten Pedersen. This person has worked in the transportation department for many years and has very good abilities. He can always build the maximum railway mileage with the minimum cost, which is rare in Italian railway construction. Managed talent. As the Prime Minister finished speaking, a swarthy middle-aged man wearing single-rimmed glasses and slightly fatter came out. "Your Majesty, Prime Minister. I saw him speaking slightly to Carlo and the Prime Minister before speaking. Currently, there is no railway built in Sardinia, which is very detrimental to the development of Sardinia. You must know that Sardinia is home to nearly 800,000 people. If there is no railway, it will affect the economic development of Sardinia, so we have transportation. After careful consideration, the ministry decided to build a railway to Sardinia. To this end, we have sent 5 exploration teams to conduct geological exploration. Finally, after comprehensive consideration, it was chosen to build a railway from Cagliari to Sassari. The reason why these 2 cities are considered is that they are the top 2 cities in Sardinia and are conducive to the transportation of goods and people. According to the line plan, our planned railway mileage in Sardinia is 261 kilometers in total, with a total of 17 stations. The construction time is 37 months, and the estimated construction cost is 39.7 million lire. After listening to Transportation Secretary Pedersen's speech, Carlo spoke first. Prime Minister, can the government come up with this money? More than 1 million lire per month. The government can still come up with it despite the squeeze. Faced with Carlo's question, the Prime Minister answered without thinking. So, is the construction of the railway considered a certainty? Yes, Your Majesty. Subsequently, the Prime Minister put forward several other proposals, all of which were dealt with one by one. Some of them were rejected and some were adopted. And Carlo is also among them. Do you want to ask? Everything seems to be the same as before. However, as the thickness of the proposal became thinner and thinner, the atmosphere gradually became more solemn. Many people feel that this is a coming storm. Sure enough, the Prime Minister then picked up a proposal and spoke. This is the Ministry of Interior's regulations on strengthening the management of large-scale gatherings and demonstrations. Sabo, please stand up and explain to everyone. Okay, Prime Minister. The former mayor of Rome stood up and spoke. Currently, there have been demonstrations in various cities in Italy. Although most of these demonstrations were peaceful and orderly, there were still a small number of cases of vandalism, smashing and looting, which greatly endangered public safety. At the same time, it also makes people feel the danger. So in order to avoid such a situation from happening, our Ministry of Interior must control these demonstrations. First of all, in view of the different circumstances of the parade, the approval was changed from the city government to the Ministry of Interior, because we have more experience in distinguishing which games are controllable. It's uncontrollable. And then we should. Sabo. Lin Len Zong Zong said so much. Many people murmured in their hearts everyone present is a smart person, and everyone knows who this proposal to strengthen supervision of parades is directed at. Carlo looked a little unhappy when he heard this proposal, because he knew that it was directed at him. Since there's a showdown, let's do it. Chapter 73 Risk Everything. I'm sorry, I didn't understand something. Carlo suddenly interrupted and asked. Facing the young king's inquiry, His Excellency the Minister of the Interior was obviously well prepared. He smiled and spoke to Carlo. Since Your Majesty didn't understand, I'll say it again. Facing Sabo's words of pretending to be stupid, Carlo was furious. Now he had no choice. None of these people were his, so he had to go into battle naked. Your Excellency, Home Secretary, maybe you don't understand what I mean. What I'm saying is that the reasons for strengthening the supervision of parades are a bit, how should I put it, I don't quite understand them. These people are basically people with strong patriotic enthusiasm. If its march is restricted, it will make people think that the kingdom is resigned to France, which is not conducive to unity. But, Your Majesty, there are some saboteurs in these marches, and they are disrupting the peaceful lives of the people. The police can be put in charge of supervision. As long as someone commits acts of destruction, they will be arrested immediately. Your Majesty, this will occupy police resources and reduce the police's energy and time to deal with other matters. It will also have the effect of reducing public security. Then, can't we recruit more police officers? Your Majesty, this requires time and money, and a qualified police officer requires several months of training. In that case, General Sergeant, maybe you can send the military police to help the Minister of the Interior for a while, and then return after the new batch of police officers are trained. Facing Carlo's sudden involvement of the army, Sabo, as the Minister of the Interior, was caught off guard and was stunned on the spot. However, the Minister of the Interior was confused, which did not mean that Carlo's idea would come true. Prime Minister Desperatus stood up. Your Majesty, regarding the parade, we can handle it, so don't bother the troops. It was a taboo for the military to interfere in local affairs. No government official wanted to see such a scene, so other ministers then came up with suggestions, as if they had just woken up from a dream. Your Majesty, our Ministry of Finance can allocate sufficient funds for police training. Our Ministry of Education can also contribute. The same goes for the Ministry of Health. Facing the ministers who were all talking about their opinions, Carlo watched everything happening in front of him happily. He had long expected that this would happen. When he talked about military help after seeing that Carlo stopped talking, the suggestions gradually died down. However, the atmosphere at the scene became increasingly weird. Many people kept looking at Sabo and Carlo with their eyes. It was obvious that in the performance just now, the Interior Minister was completely defeated, and the rhythm was completely controlled by the young monarch. Now that his confidants have been defeated, only the Prime Minister can take action in person. I saw him wait until everyone calmed down, then immediately stepped forward and spoke. Your Majesty, the parade was caused by the dispute between our country and France. If it continues, it will bring huge losses to both our countries. Not to mention, the total value of goods exported to France has reached 912 million lire. These are basically agricultural products such as wine, livestock, which involve millions of families, and we need to carefully consider our relationship with France. It is obvious that the Prime Minister no longer uses the parade as an excuse, but directly speaks out about the core interests, and he is talking about Italy's most critical economy. The Prime Minister's words made many people at the scene think deeply. After all, France is so involved. If France is angered, it will not be a good thing for Italy. Faced with the Prime Minister using economic interests as a weapon, Carlo was obviously well prepared as he spoke. Prime Minister, the economy is indeed a very important issue for the kingdom. When Carlo said this, he immediately changed the subject. But this is not the reason why we can surrender to France. You must know France's attitude towards our country. Tunisia directly occupied it without any discussion with our country. If we acquiesce to France's behavior because of this, that and other reasons, so what should we do about Italy's national self-confidence? You must know that before Germany won the Franco-Prussian War, it was basically divided. If it was all because of the need to consider this and that, then how could they fight France? So in my opinion, if Italy can submit to France because of its lack of strength, it can also use this reason to submit to other countries. By then, we Italians will have no place in Europe. In the view of Carlo, whose soul comes from the great eastern countries of later generations, Italy can die standing, but it must not yield to the pressure of other countries. A gentleman's constant self-improvement is what Italy urgently needs. As for the economy, it can be solved after Italy builds its national self-confidence. As the old people of later generations said, we can rebuild the broken bottles and jars at home. If we succumb to the pressure of other countries, how can we talk about the rise of the nation? Carlo's speech surprised many people present. I didn't expect this monarch to have such a bloody side, but considering his age, it makes sense. On the other hand, the two military generals were very interested in Carlo's speech. Of course, now was not a good time to interrupt. Carlo's speech made the Prime Minister angry, and he just said it. I can understand His Majesty's mood, but we must take into account the strength that Italy has. There is a slang in my hometown, how big the appetite is, how big the bread is. Obviously, the Prime Minister was saying that Carlo was speaking too loudly and did not consider the actual situation in Italy at all. Faced with the Prime Minister's sarcasm, Carlo was not to be outdone. What a coincidence. There is a slang saying in my hometown that everything depends on man-made efforts, and man can conquer nature. Although no one had heard of the slang in Carlo's mouth, everyone understood the meaning of his words. At this time, many people had playful expressions on their faces. As for the old and young in front of them, they all stared at each other like cockfighting cocks. The atmosphere gradually became a little delicate, and it was about to form a showdown. It was urgent for someone to step forward and mediate the atmosphere. There were only 3 qualified people at the scene, 2 from the military and Speaker Leslie. But at this time, the normally unassuming speaker walked up to the 2 of them and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, Prime Minister, I think both of you are right. They are all considering Italy, but in different directions." As Leslie spoke, the 2 men's attitudes softened, and others immediately echoed the speaker's words. Yes, the speaker is right. It's just a different direction. That's right. Although the 2 are separated, they can feel each other's attitude and will never change. Carlo said at this time, although our country is too deeply involved in the economy of France, they still cannot ignore Italy's attitude. It was obvious that Carlo was declaring that he would not waver. Carlo's words clearly angered the Prime Minister. Desperate, pushed away the people around him, walked quickly to Carlo, and looked at the monarch in front of him. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, and I won't waver." The scene in front of them made many officials hold their breath, fearing that the 2 would fight, and the 2 military bosses also hurried forward, ready to see the situation and separate them. However, the Prime Minister did not do what they thought, but said it with a smile. "Then, I hope your Majesty will get what you want." After walking, he left without looking back. Soon the news about the dispute between the king and the Prime Minister spread throughout Rome. Some said that His Majesty neglected the Prime Minister, which made him angry. Others said that the Prime Minister angered His Majesty, so the 2 had a quarrel. But no matter where these news come from, a huge rift between the Prime Minister and the king is certain. As a party involved, Carlo knew very well the meaning of the last words spoken by the Prime Minister. If he failed, he would have to bear the consequences himself, and had nothing to do with the Prime Minister. If he was not familiar with history, Carlo would certainly not dare to gamble, because if he failed, his reputation would suffer a huge blow. A reputation for misbehavior cannot escape. Of course, if he succeeds, the reputation for wise and farsightedness will also accompany him. So what are you waiting for? Carlo is betting everything. Chapter 74. The Sino-French War breaks out. Since Carlo has staked everything, he must try his best. Now that the Prime Minister is no longer stopping him, various preparations must be accelerated. First of all, the 2 Venice-class patrol ships are the key to this operation. Although it is impossible to compete with the future French dispatch fleet, as long as they are used well, they can still be blinded. In Carlo's view, the biggest role of these 2 patrol ships is to intercept transportation supply lines and even block their Far East trade. As long as this can be done, Paris will go crazy. Therefore, Carlo was naturally very concerned about it, and rushed to Genoa many times to check on the 2 ships undergoing sea trials. "Hello, Lieutenant Colonel Soares." "Hello, Your Majesty." "Hello, Captain Leifer." "Hello, Your Majesty." "Hello, Captain Gomez." "Hello, Your Majesty." In the Genoa naval base, Carlo cordially greeted the commanders of the armored patrol formation who had just returned from the sea trial. Some people may wonder why the cruise captain has the rank of captain, and shouldn't he be a school-level officer? Indeed, according to the practice of the Italian Navy, those who can serve as captains on cruisers are basically at the rank of lieutenant commander, not to mention that this is a 7,000-ton cruiser, and this should be the case. However, these 2 battleships are quite special. First, they were funded by the royal family. Second, these 2 battleships are probably unlikely to appear in the Italian Navy's combat ship sequence. Because Carlo has already talked with Admiral Garlock, Minister of the Navy, these 2 battleships will be sold in the future. Of course, Carlo will not treat the Navy badly. The funds obtained from selling the warships can be included in the Navy's subsequent shipbuilding funds. Of course, it is impossible for the Navy to get this money for free. The Navy needs to prepare personnel for these 2 warships, and ordinary ones are not enough. They must be elite troops and strong generals at this time. Carlo informed Admiral Gorek of his true purpose. The 2 warships would be sold to the King government in the future to fight against the French invasion. Given that its naval strength is not strong, it is also necessary to consider deploying crews for it. Faced with Carlo's instructions, Admiral Gorek didn't know what to say, but in view of the fine traditions of the Navy, he could only do as he was told. Fortunately, when it comes to selecting crew members, Italy has a large number of experienced veterans, so it is not a big problem to select some. However, he has some difficulties in selecting captains. When it comes to captain candidates with naval combat experience, Italy has no shortage of captains at all. The Navy had a large number of them after the battle with the Austro-Hungarian Navy in the Sally Sea. However, 17 or 8 years have passed since this naval battle. If those captains had not retired, they would have been at least a major general, and they were obviously not suitable to fight in the Far East. After all, if a general level figure appeared on this ship, it would be difficult to say that Italy was not deeply involved. Moreover, it must also be considered that these two battleships may be in danger of being captured by the French, so the risk is too high for senior officers to appear. Not only were senior officers unsuitable, but even school level officers had to be as few as possible, so the opportunity came for naval officers at the captain level, and two lucky captains, Gomes and Leifer, were selected to become two ships. Captain on patrol. As for Lieutenant Colonel Soars, he is responsible for commanding the formation and teaching the two captains how to use cruisers, and will not follow the battleships to the Far East. These two captains were not chosen randomly, they are both rising stars within the Navy. Among them, Captain Leifer was born in a noble family in Turin. He joined the Navy in 1873 and once served as the second officer, traveling around the world with the frigate Gallipoli. Later he served as captain of the gunboat US Fighter and first mate of the cruiser HMS Valiant. During his tenure, he received unanimous praise from superiors and subordinates. His superiors once commented that he is brave, calm, courageous, and resourceful in doing things, and has strong personal opinions. But he can also listen to the opinions of others. As for Captain Gomes, he was born into a fisherman family in Sardinia. Although his background was not good, Gomes was extremely talented in learning. He was once recruited by the naval officers of Livorno with the third place in the school. During the military academy, Gomes performed well in school and eventually graduated second in his grade. He was subsequently awarded the rank of second lieutenant and served as a gunnery officer on the armored ship Garrosh and as a gunnery officer on the cruiser Piccolo, second mate, first mate and other positions. During this period, superiors at all levels spoke highly of him and called him a Pushno-like figure. This man was not particularly famous in the Battle of Salisbury, but the third formation under his command firmly blocked the Austro-Hungarian fleet and bought time for the Italian Navy to regroup. It can be said that these two captain officers are the next generation hope of the Navy. Appointing them as captains shows how serious the Navy is. After Carlo greeted the three of them, he continued to ask, "What's this audition like?" God bless, this sea trial was not bad. The two captains have a tacit understanding. Sometimes, even if I don't give orders, they can make the same choice tacitly. As the commander of the fleet, Lieutenant Colonel Soars praised the actions of the two captains, and his praise made the two thin-skinned captains lower their heads. In front of Carlo, they were still a little uncomfortable with these compliments. I am still very clear about the capabilities of Captains Leifer and Leifer. This is not a problem for them. Carlo had been to Genoa not once or twice, so he naturally knew the abilities of these two people. So after giving them a compliment, he continued to ask, "So, are there any shortcomings in this sea trial? In terms of feeling, its turning radius is larger, perhaps because the ship is longer. In addition, the power system may be due to the use of a new triple expansion steam engine. The failure rate is much higher than that of the previous vertical compound steam engine." Also, gunnery officers and soldiers responded that, because the two-stage main gun adopts a fully enclosed turret structure, its internal ventilation is very poor, and it will feel stuffy if you stay in it for a long time. In addition, during shooting training, the gunpowder smoke inside is very heavy, which greatly affects the operation of personnel. In addition, the three commanders talked about a lot of issues, and Carlo listened patiently to their speeches. However, the designer Vittorio Cuniberti on the side was writing quickly, recording the exposed problems. solve the problems that can be solved immediately, and come up with improvement plans for the next construction of those that cannot be solved. Carlo didn't stay long at the shipyard, then invited the 3 officers to dinner in the beautiful Genoa Dove restaurant. The 4 of them were talking and laughing. But then an attendant came in with a telegram. "Your Majesty, this is an urgent telegram from France." When Carlo heard that it was an urgent telegram, he stopped chatting with the 3 commanders and took the telegram. There were not many words on it, but the content was what Carlo had been waiting for. The French Parliament just made a resolution in the afternoon to declare war on the Qing dynasty. The time he had been waiting for was ripe, and he needed to act immediately. After Carlo put away the telegram, he smiled at the 3 curious officers. "You 3, you don't have much time. Something happened today, so I can only update 1 chapter. I hope my roommates will forgive me." Chapter 75 Ship Purchase. The attendants and guards in the Sangkal commercial yamen have been extremely cautious in the past 2 days, even walking lightly, for fear of making a big noise and provoking the Shangwan's anger. Therefore, the idlers at the yamen gate had a hard time, and the guardsmen took it out on them whenever they had trouble. It was really bad luck. As the core of the serious atmosphere in the 3 portrayed yamen, Li Zongtang has been upset recently. The reason is very simple. France is restless in Vietnam. The new French minister Budner even said in public several times that, since the Qing dynasty cannot give France what it wants, then France will take it herself. His naked threats of war made everyone in the court worried. Another issue is the return of the second ship Jinping built in Germany. Liu Buchan and Wei Han, who were responsible for receiving the warship, jointly sent a telegram informing Vokeng shipyard that it was conducting sea trials on the second ship Jinping. Before the sea trials were completed, the shipyard refused to release. The shipyard claims that if a ship that has not completed sea trials is allowed to go to sea and any accident occurs, it will be a huge loss to the reputation of the shipyard. However, secret messages sent by Liu Buchan and Wei Han told them that the French were behind all this. The French bribed people in the shipyard and dragged the second ship Jinping into the shipyard. As for the 2 people's move to accept the battleship in advance, they were blocked by German soldiers guarding the shipyard. The second calm ship cannot return home early, which makes Li Zongtang very worried. Seeing that Li Zongtang was worried about this, Zhao Fu, an aide, opened his mouth to persuade him. "Don't worry too much, in Zongtang. I believe that the second ship Jinping will return home safely. Yashin, I'm not worried about calming the second ship." Having said this, Li Zongtang took out a copy and said, "This is what Zheng Laojiu reported. The Far and the barbarians are stirring up trouble everywhere in Vietnam, and there is a possibility of war. Therefore, I sincerely ask for permission to strike first. Zongtang, I'm afraid this is not Master Zheng's intention to retreat in order to advance." Zhao Fu revealed the intentions of Zheng Guoquan, the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi. "Everyone knows Lao Jiu's intentions, but we won't fight this battle if we can. I didn't see that Zhuo Jigao spent a lot of money to recover Xinjiang. How will we deal with it if we fight with the French?" The conflict between Li Zongtang and Zhuo Jigao is well known to the world. They both came from Wen Zhengang sect, but they have never dealt with it. Especially after the death of Wen Zhengang and the decline in the strength of the Hunan army, the 2 sides disliked each other even more. Whether the imperial court was behind it or not is a matter for the beholder. Anyway, after Zhuo Jigao regained Xinjiang, Li Zongtang was promoted to governor of Zili and minister of Biang. In order to reward Zhuo Jigao's contribution, he was appointed governor of Liangjiang and minister of Nanyang. And unlike Li Zongtang, who cautions against haste and must be patient, Zhuo Jigao has always declared in a high-profile manner that he does not need to be patient with the French in Vietnam and will take action when it is time to take action. He even said in a book that he was going to take the Chu army to Guangdong and Guangxi to have a fight with the French. Fortunately, the princes and the queen mother were sensible people and did not agree to Zhuo Jigao, so the situation was able to be maintained. But just when Li Zongtang was sighing, a servant hurried in. Before he could ask, the servant immediately reported it. "Sir, there is a Chinese minister Jia Liwen outside the door asking for an audience." Minister of Italy, although Li Zongtang didn't know what this visitor meant. He was bound to receive an envoy from a country when he visited. Arrange for the Italian minister to wait in the lobby. I will be here soon. Then Li Zongtang tidied up his clothes and rushed to the lobby point. When Li Zongtang arrived at the lobby, he discovered that there was not only the Italian minister, but also a kind-faced man. Wasn't it Howard, the Italian businessman who had visited him some time ago? Although he was a little curious as to why the businessman followed the minister to visit him, his good cultivation prevented him from asking, "Hello, Minister Jialiwen, Mr. Howard, hello, Your Majesty the Governor." After a brief greeting and waiting for the servants to bring tea and snacks, Li Zongtang spoke. "I don't know what advice Your Excellency, Minister, can give me when visiting me." Faced with Li Zongtang's inquiry, Minister Jialiwen, who had a Chinese name, answered with a smile. "I don't have anything to do, but I received a telegram from China related to your country. I thought the governor would be interested, so I dared to come over." It turned out to be a message. Li Zongtang, whose curiosity was aroused by this news, also asked appropriately, "I don't know what kind of news would make the minister come here." Faced with Li Zongtang's inquiry, Minister Jialiwen's face tightened, and he spoke seriously. "Our country has received news that France has just decided to go to war with your country." Snapped. A teacup was accidentally smashed by Li Zongtang. He suddenly stood up and stared at Minister Jialiwen. "Your Excellency, Minister, are you serious about this? I think our government will not joke about this kind of thing." After receiving the confirmed news from Minister Jialiwen, Li Zongtang was stunned. Jialiwen and Howard looked at him with some worry. "Your Majesty the Governor." Li Zongtang, who was woken up, first expressed his apology. "Sorry, Your Excellency, Minister, I'm a little shocked by this news. We can understand that, after all, war is a major event for every country, but for some reason, Li Zongtang felt that he was more relaxed now. Only then did he look at the two visitors and said, "I don't think Your Excellency the Minister came here to tell me the news. Your Majesty the Governor, you guessed wrong. I'm bringing this news this time. But Mr. Howard is different. Maybe he has something to discuss with the governor." After finishing speaking, Minister Jialiwen left point. Although Li Zongtang didn't know why Minister Jialiwen left, he had a vague guess, but he didn't intend to tell the truth. Instead, he asked about Howard, who was still staying. "This Mr. Huo can let the minister bring you here specially. I believe your business must be very big, sir." "You're welcome. I'm just doing a small business. However, the company just purchased 2 armored cruisers recently, but they haven't been sold yet, so my company is very worried about this." 2 armored cruisers, no sales. Li Zongtang understood. Before that, he had deliberately learned about the situation in Europe. Italy and France were not dealing with each other, and the two countries had a dispute in a place called Tunisia Point. As long as he combines the previously obtained information with Howard's words, then he can figure out the Italians' plan. Point of course, Mr. Nakado doesn't really think that this ship cannot be sold, but he still has to ask what kind of ship it is. "I wonder how the performance of these 2 ships is." As soon as Li Zongtang asked about the performance of his boat, Howard immediately became confident. "Both of these 2 ships are new ships launched this year. Their standard tonnage is 6,850 tons and their full load tonnage is 7,460 tons. In terms of performance, the performance that Howard said shocked Li Zongtang. It has a maximum speed of 18.6 knots, a tonnage of more than 7,000, and is equipped with 4 254mm and 6 152mm naval guns. It is really a good ship. Point, since the tonnage of this ship is comparable to that of the second ship Jingping, and its speed is much faster, the price will definitely not be cheap." However, when Li Zongtang asked about the price, he was still shocked. 2.2 million taels of silver per ship, which is much more expensive than the second Carming ship. Of course, the performance is much better than that of the second ship Jingjing. Although Li Zongtang doesn't know much about naval battles, he still knows that fast ships are slow. The faster the warship is, the more powerful it is, and the higher the price. And the Howard businessman's last words made his heart move. "Your Excellency Zhangtang, if your country does not have anyone to operate these 2 armored cruisers, our company can recruit retired naval officers and soldiers to operate these 2 warships. Of course, if there is a war, your country will need to provide additional subsidies. What this means is that the Italians are willing to send ships and people to help the court fight the war. Although it is said that they are recruiting retired naval officers and soldiers, who is Zhangtang? These retired naval officers and soldiers may not just take off their military uniforms and change on the warship point. Since the Italians are talking about this, Li Zhangtang will certainly not refuse. No matter what happens in this war, he has achieved results by using barbarians to control barbarians. I haven't seen the imperial court use Italian ships and people to fight against the French. This is not considered effective. So what counts, of course, he did not immediately agree to Howard, a businessman under the guise of the Italian government, to send them back to Shenzhen first on the grounds that the matter was of great importance and needed to be discussed with the imperial court. After the 2 left, Li Zhangtang immediately summoned his confidants to discuss the matter as a result of discussions among many staff. This matter is only good for Li Zhangtang and has no harm. After getting the result from his staff as he expected, Li Zhangtang waited with peace of mind. Sure enough, 2 days later, French Minister Bartner submitted a declaration of war with great force. This declaration of engagement caused a stir in the imperial court. These were the French. Of course they forced the late emperor to hunt for Chengde, and they were one of the main culprits of the late emperor's untimely death. At this time, Li Zhangtang handed over the paper he had prepared, claiming that he had found an Italian who was at odds with France and could buy 2 7,000-ton giant ships from them to consolidate coastal defense and prevent a recurrence of the Gentian Year incident. Second time, Opium War. Then he went through a secret process. In the secret process, Li Zhangtang said that he could borrow Italian foreign soldiers and use them to deal with foreign soldiers. Faced with Li Zhangtang's compromise, the court agreed with incredible speed. In response to Li Zhangtang's proposal to purchase ships, the Ministry of Household Affairs was asked to allocate 800,000 taels and ordered all provinces to raise funds. Among them, Zili has the largest share, reaching 1.1 million taels. As for other provinces, it is between 100,000 and 150,000 taels. Of course, the rich will have more, and the poorer will have less. Moreover, the fundraising time is tight this time, and must be raised within half a month. This was another flurry of events, but after half a month, the funds from all provinces were collected, totaling 5.5 million taels. Don't get me wrong, Li Zhangtang asked for more, not with the intention of enriching himself, but with the intention of taking this opportunity to purchase a batch of guns and ammunition from Italy and send them to Zheng Laojiu. Facing the war in France, it was rare for the Qing dynasty to unite on one thing. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.